Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to a time when men still believed a horse and a sword could win a modern war. You're going to saddle up, adjust that itchy wool uniform, and ride straight into one of the most devastating conflicts in history, the First World War. Yeah, you probably won't survive this. And if you do, you won't come back the same. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Bonus points if you're under a blanket with a cat asleep on your chest. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sign your name in thick black ink, the pen shaking just slightly in your fingers. The recruiting officer doesn't notice, or maybe he's seen it too many times to care. Your name joins a long, hopeful list pinned to the war machine. You're not drafted, you volunteer. You've seen the posters. Cavalry units still have a certain magic, a romantic haze wrapped in glory and polished leather boots. You imagine wind in your hair and sunlight glinting off your saber as you ride full speed into history. No one tells you that Saber will probably never leave its scabbard. The year is 1914, Europe is tinder, and someone's just dropped the match. You're standing in the cool morning mist surrounded by other young men who also thought this would be a grand adventure. Some wear crooked smiles, some look like they're already halfway to regret. But once you're issued your uniform and told to report to the barracks for cavalry training, that's it. You're in. Your first few weeks are humbling. Horses are not romantic. They are big, stubborn, opinionated creatures with a tendency to relieve themselves at the worst possible times. You spend hours learning how to approach, saddle, mount, and care for your mount. You discover your boots don't break in so much as break you. And the saber training? It looks good on parade, but swinging a blade from horseback takes a kind of coordination that few humans actually possess. More often than not, someone ends up tumbling into the mud. But there's something noble here too. The old sergeant, his moustache greying, his chest full of faded medals, teaches you how to ride not just with your legs, but with your instincts. He tells stories about the Boer War, about how a single rider can change the fate of a battle. You listen wide-eyed, heart-hammering. You believe every word. Then come the drills. The sun scorches your back as you ride in formation across open fields, lances at the ready. You practice charging, wheeling, feinting and falling back. The officers are obsessed with discipline. Every hoofbeat synchronized, every bridle polished. One guy falls asleep in the saddle and topples off during formation. He earns a week's worth of stable duty, shoveling steaming piles in a wooden shed that smells of ammonia and regret. At night, around the barracks fire, someone pulls out a harmonica. You swap stories and pass around a dented flask of something that tastes like nail polish remover. The stars overhead are cold and endless, and none of you are really prepared for what's coming. Then the orders come. You're shipping out. The mood turns electric. Some cheer, others go silent. You pack up what little you have, your kit, your saber, your letters from home, the pressed flower someone gave you back in town. You whisper a promise to yourself that you'll make it back. Though deep down, you can already feel the weight of history pressing in. You know this war won't be what they promised in the posters. Boarding the train is like stepping into a different world. The platform's filled with mothers, sisters, sweethearts, faces full of pride, terror, denial. You catch sight of a girl you once danced with at the Harvest Festival. She waves, you wave back. The whistle blows, the train lurches forward. Your stomach does too. Somewhere between miles of countryside, a grizzled corporal leans in and tells you the truth no one wants to say out loud. Cavalry's dead, he mutters. They just haven't buried it yet. You laugh it off, pretend it's just cynicism, but part of you wonders. At the port, your regiment loads onto a ship bound for France. The horses go too, reluctantly. One rears up, eyes rolling, hooves striking sparks off the cobblestones. Another refuses to board until 4 men drag it up the ramp. You stay close to your own mount, whispering nonsense into its ear to calm you both. The sea crossing is rough, and the stench of men, fear and animals turns your stomach more than the waves. The coast of France appears on the horizon like a promise. You squint toward it, thinking it looks peaceful from here, but the minute you land, reality starts to unravel. Columns of wounded stream the other direction. Faces pale, limbs missing, eyes empty. One man walks by completely naked except for boots soaked in blood. You don't ask questions, you just try not to meet their eyes. You ride inland with your unit, nerves shot, the clatter of hooves and jingling gear the only rhythm holding you together. The roads are lined with trees, leaves fluttering like nothing's wrong, but every mile forward smells more like smoke, mud, and something you can't quite name, something metallic and wrong. By the time you reach the staging area, you've stopped imagining glory, you just want to survive. The officers say you'll be riding out soon, real action. Everyone pretends to be excited. You check your gear, you check your horse, you try to sleep, you fail. And somewhere in the darkness, in the back of your mind, you hear that corporal's voice again. Cavalry's dead. Morning drills begin before the sun has the decency to rise. The air bites at your face as you tighten your saddle straps with fingers gone stiff from cold and nerves. Around you other riders are fumbling through the same routine, steam rising from the horses' flanks like smoke from a battlefield you haven't yet reached. This is what you signed up for, isn't it? The cavalry, men on horseback, swift and noble, storming into battle like the knights of old. But the romance of it is already fading, a dream dissolving in the damp grey of French morning. Still, there's something hypnotic about the rhythm of cavalry life. Days are packed with drills, charge formations, close-quarter saber combat, dismounting under fire. You learn to fire your rifle from horseback, not as easy as the pamphlets make it look. The instructors bark commands with clipped efficiency, their tone always just on the edge of panic, like they're trying to outrun what they know is coming. These men have seen things, you can tell by the way they stare too long at empty fields, but behind all the shouting and sweat, there's a code, a strange mix of tradition, pride and stubborn denial. The cavalry has always seen itself as separate from the rest of the military. You're not just infantry on horseback, you're cavalry. That still means something, even now, even here. You sit straighter in the saddle, you polish your spurs, you learn the unwritten rules. Never turn your back on your mount, never let your saber dull, never show fear in front of the foot soldiers, they already think you're obsolete. The officers cling to the old ways with a grip that borders on delusion. Every morning begins with a formal inspection. Uniforms crisp, boots gleaming, horses brushed to a shine. One poor lad shows up with a fleck of dried mud on his bridle and earns himself latrine duty for a week. The message is clear. Appearances still matter, even if you're about to be shelled into oblivion. There's a strange comfort in ritual. You get used to the creak of leather, the weight of the saber at your hip, the particular tug of reins between your gloved fingers. You learn your mount's rhythms, how he finches at sudden movement, how he favours his left side when tired. You talk to him quietly when no one else is around. It's easier than talking to people. The horse doesn't ask questions. Sometimes, during a break in drills, the older troopers share stories. They talk about the glory days of cavalry, Crimea, Sudan, even the early campaigns in Africa where speed and shock meant victory. One grey-eyed sergeant, with a scar running down his cheek like a knife had tried to unzip him, tells you about a cavalry charge he led in Morocco. 50 of us against 200, he says, voice low, cut through them like a hot knife through lard. No one questions the numbers. You all want to believe him. But there's a darker undercurrent to the stories too. Tales of whole regiments vanishing under artillery fire, of horses tripping on barbed wire and throwing their riders to certain death. One rider tells you about a man who got his leg caught in the stirrup during a charge and was dragged half a mile. What was left of him had to be scraped off the field. You nod solemnly. You sleep less soundly that night. Your days fall into a rhythm of disciplined monotony. Mornings are for physical training, afternoons for mounted drills, evenings for weapons practice. You clean your rifle twice a day, even if it doesn't need it. You find a kind of peace in repetition. It keeps your hands busy, your mind quiet. But there are moments when the illusion cracks, like when a message runner from the front arrives with a face full of soot and eyes that don't blink enough. He mutters about machine guns hidden in haystacks, of horses cut down in droves before they ever reach enemy lines. The officers shoo him away, call him a rumour monger, but the damage is done. His words hang in the air like smoke. And then there's the fringe stuff, the whispered nonsense that makes the rounds during latrine breaks and late-night watch. Stories of spectral horsemen galloping through no man's land, sabers glowing white under moonlight. Some claim they've seen them, ghosts of fallen riders still charging into battle, eternally doomed to repeat their last command. You don't believe it, not really, but you do glance over your shoulder more often than you used to. One afternoon you catch a glimpse of how the war is really fought now. A column of motorised vehicles rumbles past your training ground. grey metal beasts with wheels the size of coffins and mounted guns that look like factory equipment. The men inside wear expressions like masks, cold, efficient, unromantic. A few of them smirk at you and your regiment. One gives a mocking salute. You feel heat rise in your cheeks. They may have machines, but you have tradition, you have honour, right? The officers try to reassure you. Mobility will win this war, one says. No one outruns cavalry. You nod, but in your gut you know it isn't true. You've seen the maps, you've read the reports. This war is not about mobility. It's about trenches, attrition, and technology that doesn't care how polished your boots are. Still you ride, every day, every drill. You make yourself believe that you'll be different, that your squad will be the exception. Maybe you'll find the one flank that's open. Maybe you'll be the rider who breaks the line, who turns the tide. The code demands it, so you ride. And when the bugle sounds one foggy morning summoning you to formation, you don't hesitate. You grab your rifle, adjust your saddle and fall in line. Because even if the age of cavalry is dying, you're not ready to admit it yet. Not while your saber still shines. The horse is enormous. Not quite a war elephant, but when you're standing beside him, staring up at his wide chest and the thick sinewy muscles beneath his coat, he might as well be. He snorts once and stomps a hoof, the iron shoe ringing out against the barn floor like a warning. This is your new mount, your partner, your lifeline, your 200-pound ticket to survival or a faster death. His name is already inked on the leather tag around his neck, Dagger. Fitting, you think. He's beautiful in a raw, rugged way, all dark bay with a white blaze that runs crooked down his forehead like someone spilled paint in a hurry. And he clearly hates you. It takes a week before Dagger stops trying to bite you every time you come near. 2 more before he stops flinching when you saddle him up. Trust doesn't come easy in the cavalry, especially from the horses. These animals aren't pets. They've been poked, prodded, shouted at, and trained into one of the most unpredictable environments in human history. Still, you begin to learn his patterns. He likes apples, but hates carrots. He doesn't like sudden noises, but he doesn't bolt from them either. Just flattens his ears and grinds his teeth. You start talking to him softly during grooming sessions, the brush sweeping through his coat like a slow lullaby. Sometimes he even listens. The stable is one of the few places that feel halfway sane. It smells like hay, leather, and horse sweat. Strong, yes, but oddly grounding compared to the chemical stench of the camps or the ever-present whiff of latrines. The farriers work with the quiet precision of surgeons, hammering new shoes, checking hooves, watching for cracks and strains. You overhear one grizzled veteran mutter that a horse's legs are as fragile as matchsticks and more valuable than most men's. Not exactly reassuring. At feeding time, it becomes clear that horses eat better than the soldiers. While your stew has mystery meat and exactly 1 potato chunk per serving, Dagger gets a mix of oats, alfalfa, and hay that smells good enough to consider stealing. Some soldiers do try, until they get caught and are forced to polish every bridle in the stables. You don't make that mistake. Instead, you start sneaking Dagger scraps of bread from your own rations. It's a trade. You keep him fed and he doesn't throw you during drills. At least not often. You're not the only one forming a bond. Across the rows of stalls there's an odd little soldier named Barnett who talks to his horse like it's a pen pal. He reads her letters, sings songs, even tries to teach her to nod yes and no. It sounds ridiculous until she actually starts responding. Not perfectly, but enough to make you wonder if maybe, just maybe, these horses understand more than they let on. One night during stable duty, a storm rolls in. Hard rain, cold wind, flashes of lightning that turn the world inside out every few seconds. The horses lose it, screaming, bucking, stamping like they know what's coming before the humans do. You're in Dagger's stall, trying to calm him down as thunder rattles the beams overhead. You press your forehead to his neck and feel the tremors running through him like a taut wire. He doesn't bite, doesn't rear, just stands there, breathing fast and shallow. You stand with him for an hour, soaked through, shivering, but in that moment you stop being strangers. Out on the field you start to ride better. He starts to respond to your cues without force, a slight lean, a whispered command, and he moves, not always gracefully, but with purpose. The saber drills feel different when you're connected to your mount. The blade swings easier. You can feel the rhythm of his gallop through your boots, like a second heartbeat. You stop feeling like two beings strapped together and start feeling like one. The trainers push you harder now. You're not just learning to fight on horseback, you're learning to think on horseback. How to control panic when gunfire cracks through the air. how to position your mount to protect his flank during a charge, how to dismount in seconds and remount while under fire. You drill over and over until the muscle memory kicks in, even as your legs burn and your back screams. Still, there's an edge of madness to it all. The enemy has tanks, they have machine guns, they have artillery that can shell a whole cavalry unit before it's even within striking distance. But you keep training for a kind of battle that's mostly extinct. It's like preparing to joust a steam engine, and yet nobody calls it off. No one stands up and says, maybe this isn't a good idea, because tradition is louder than common sense in the military. A strange fact floats through the ranks one day, something that makes everyone pause. The Germans are training camels on the Middle Eastern front. Camels? It sounds like a joke, but apparently they're better in desert terrain. Can go longer without water, less skittish. It's absurd, and yet no one laughs. The war has become a circus, and the animals are just part of the act. There's also a rumour that some horses have learned to lie down on command during shelling, flattening themselves like trained dogs to avoid shrapnel. You want to believe it's true. You try to teach Dagger the trick, but he looks at you like you've asked him to recite poetry. Maybe some horses can do it. Maybe others just get lucky. The truth is, horses are dying by the thousands. You hear the numbers whispered by veterinary officers. They fall to bullets, to gas, to starvation. Sometimes their legs snap in the mud, and they have to be put down on the spot. You watch one such scene from a distance, a young rider kneeling by a trembling creature, a revolver shaking in his hand. You can't hear the shot, but you feel it. Still, the bond holds. Every morning you check on Dagger before anything else. You brush his coat, you whisper good morning, you make sure he's breathing, standing, whole, and every evening you do it again, because as ridiculous as it sounds, if he goes down, part of you goes with him. You may be a soldier, but your soul, it rides on 4 legs. It's a grey morning when the order comes down, France awaits. No more drills, no more parades, no more polishing boots for the sake of it. This time you're moving out for real. The excitement hits hard and strange. It bubbles in your gut, not like joy, but more like a fever. Some of the men cheer, some go quiet. One guy throws up in his helmet and pretends it's just bad stew. You pack your gear in silence, cinch your saddle straps tighter than usual, and give Dagger an extra pat between the ears. He snorts and shakes his head like even he knows this is going to suck. The regiment moves out in formation, a long column of men and horses stretching down the road like a living spine. Dust rises behind you as hooves clatter over cobblestones, and villagers come out to wave goodbye. Children shouting, women blowing kisses, old men saluting with hands that shake. You catch the eye of a girl leaning out of a second-story window. She holds up a flower, a red poppy, and you nod. You want to believe you'll be back to Tarnbach soon, maybe riding down this same road in triumph. Deep down, though, you already know it won't be like that. The first leg is by rail. Horses, men, gear, all packed into boxcars that smell like hay, oil, and unwashed fear. You squeeze in next to Dagger, who barely fits. He paces in tight circles for hours until he finally settles, head drooped, eyes half-lidded. You sit on an overturned bucket and try to read a letter from home, but your hands keep shaking. Every few minutes someone breaks the silence with a cough, a snore, or a nervous fart that sets off a round of curses. It's miserable. It's cramped. It's the beginning of the real war. You arrive at the coast under a sky so low and grey it feels like it could crush you. The port is a madhouse. Troops loading and unloading, officers shouting over the wind, crates tumbling from carts, and somewhere, someone arguing in at least 4 languages. The horses hate it. Dagger flares his nostrils and digs in his hooves at the loading ramp. You tug the reins gently, whispering a lie about how this is just a short boat ride, nothing to worry about. He doesn't buy it, but eventually he boards. The troopship is enormous, yet somehow not big enough. Horses are packed into pens below deck, a dark underworld of stomping hooves, dripping water, and the constant creak of metal groaning under pressure. The air smells like mould and sickness. Some of the horses start panicking within hours. A mare kicks through a wooden partition and breaks her leg before anyone can calm her down. They put her down right there, pistol behind the ear, the sound lost in the belly of the ship but still somehow echoing inside your skull. Sea travel is not romantic, it's nausea on a schedule. You hang your head over the railing and revisit your last 3 meals in reverse order. The spray slaps your face and the salt gets into everything, your eyes, your mouth, your boots. Dagger seems unaffected, of course, just stares at you with those large, unamused eyes every time you stumble past his stall. You envy his balance and his stomach. Then, after what feels like a week crammed inside a floating coffin, land appears. The cliffs of France are jagged and wind-battered, rising out of the sea like they're not entirely thrilled to see you. Disembarkation is chaos again. You help lead Dagger down the ramp, both of you grateful to be back on solid ground. The horses are herded together, tails swishing, eyes wide. You can sense their confusion. They were bred to roam fields, not cross oceans for reasons they can't understand. You ride inland slowly, the roads clogged with wagons, artillery, refugees, and a nauseating number of bodies. Not just soldiers, cows, dogs, anything that couldn't outrun the shell fire. Buzzards circle overhead like they've just won the lottery. The farther you go, the more damage you see. Entire villages flattened. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Craters where fields used to be. And everywhere, mud. Thick, sticky, morale-sucking mud that clings to hooves, boots, and hope alike. At one bombed-out crossroads, you pass a cart piled with helmets, some with bullet holes, some with dried blood. No one explains, and no one asks. You just keep riding, keeping your eyes forward, pretending the stink of decay is just your imagination. Dagger stumbles once in a muddy rut, and your heart jumps into your throat. You dismount, walk him for a while, check his legs for strain. He's fine, but you're not. The camp is set up in a forest that no longer feels alive. The trees are there, sure, but half of them are blackened, and the other half look like they want to leave. Tents are pitched in sloppy rows, the ground too soft to hold a decent stake. You tie Dagger to a post and rub him down, your hands shaking harder than they did on the boat. He leans into your touch for a moment, then swats you in the face with his tail. You laugh, actual honest laughter, and realise it's the first time in days you've remembered what your own voice sounds like. That night, the officers gather you all for a briefing. Maps are unrolled, terrain described, objectives given. You're part of a forward support unit now. No frontal charges just yet, thank God. Instead, you'll be doing recon, message relays, and if needed, fast response flanking. It sounds useful, it sounds survivable. You cling to that. Before turning in, you walk the perimeter and see a small cross nailed to a tree with a helmet perched on top. A name is scrawled across it in pencil, barely legible. You stand there for a long time, then reach up and adjust the helmet so it doesn't fall. A silly gesture maybe, but it feels important. You return to Dagger's side, lay your bedroll nearby, and close your eyes. You dream of roads that go in circles, of horses that speak in riddles, of home. When you wake up to the sound of distant gunfire, you're not surprised, just cold. The war has arrived, and now you're inside it. You hear the first shell before you see it, an unnatural whistle, high and thin, slicing through the morning air like it's trying to tell a secret too fast. You're mid-conversation with a private from another regiment, some light banter about who smells worse, horse or rider, when the whistle ends in a violent crack that sucks all the air from your lungs. Dirt, smoke, and pieces of the world erupt about 50 yards ahead. The ground lifts, a tree disintegrates. Every horse in camp screams at once, an ungodly chorus that sends chills down your spine. Dagger rears, and you instinctively grab his reins, yanking hard to keep him from bolting. The other private isn't so lucky. His mount panics, throws him into a sapling, and bolts straight into the tree line. He's screaming something about his arm being broken, but it's hard to hear over the chaos. More shells follow, dropping like angry punctuation marks. Each one slams into the earth with a thud that doesn't echo. It just sticks in your chest like a cough that won't come up. You drag Dagger behind a thick stump and drop to one knee, shielding his flank as best you can. He's trembling beneath your hands, sweat pouring off him even though the air is still cold. You realise your heart's racing so fast you can't feel your fingertips. Somewhere behind you, someone's shouting for a medic. Somewhere closer, someone's not shouting at all anymore. Welcome to your first real contact with the enemy. There's no visual on them, no line of soldiers galloping toward you with raised sabers, just distant artillery, fired from somewhere you can't see, faceless and efficient. You'd imagined war as chaotic, but at least visible. Banners, enemies, a clear line between you and them. Instead, it's just this. Noise, confusion, and the horrible realization that the world can explode beneath you without warning. When the barrage ends, it's like a switch flips. The birds return first, chirping like nothing happened. Then the groans begin. You help carry a man whose leg is bent the wrong way. His eyes are wide and glassy, locked somewhere far away. A medic shouts at you to hold pressure on a neck wound, but your hands won't stop shaking. There's blood on your trousers now, you don't know whose. After that, everything changes. The officers speak faster, the drills get sharper. The smiles, what few there were, disappear completely. You don't bother unpacking fully anymore. The idea of settling in somewhere feels almost disrespectful. You're posted further up the line now, closer to the trenches. Not in them yet, but close enough that the mud has a familiar smell. Metal, rot, desperation. Your first skirmish comes unexpectedly during a routine patrol through a patch of farmland that's been chewed to hell. The grass is gone, the fence is flattened, and the house at the centre looks like it's been punched repeatedly by a god with bad aim. You're trotting beside your unit when someone in the lead shouts, "Movement!" and everything explodes into motion. Gunfire cracks like dry branches. Horses scatter. Men dive for cover. You cling to Dagger's neck and wheel hard left, trying to get behind the hedgerow without getting picked off. Bullets zing past your ears. One tears through the edge of your saddlebag. You don't think, you just ride. It's not like the drills, not even close. Your saber never leaves its scabbard. You fire your rifle from the saddle, badly. Then again, after dismounting and throwing yourself behind a chunk of stone wall, it's all over in minutes. A brief ambush, maybe a probing attack. You don't know. What you do know is that when you climb back into the saddle, your hands are sticky with someone else's blood. That night, your captain calls it a minor engagement. He congratulates you all on your composure. No one claps, no one speaks. You just sit there by the fire, staring into it like it might blink back. The stars overhead don't care. And your horse? Dagger doesn't sleep either. He stands just outside the firelight, staring into the trees like he expects more gunfire. You check him for wounds again, just in case. He's unharmed, but you can tell he remembers every sound, every vibration. Horses don't forget, neither do you. There's an argument over coffee the next morning, two sergeants debating whether cavalry still has a role in this madness. One insists that fast mobility is the key to breaking trench lines. The other just laughs bitterly and points toward the horizon, where another artillery barrage is lighting up the sky. "You gonna out-gallop that?" he mutters. No one answers. Word floats around camp of entire cavalry units getting wiped out in a matter of minutes. Attempted charges turned into bloodbaths. The phrase suicide saddle starts getting thrown around, mostly as a joke, but the kind of joke that lands hard in your gut. And yet, you keep going out. You ride patrols, deliver messages between trenches, ferry wounded back from the front. You move in the spaces between destruction, fast enough to avoid most of it, but never far enough to feel safe. You start sleeping in your tack, too tired to undress, too wary to waste time. Dagger learns to lie down when you do, resting beside you in a sort of uneasy truce with the ground. Then one afternoon you see it, your first real cavalry charge. Not your unit, thank God. Another one, across the field. They line up in perfect formation, uniforms sharp, banners fluttering like something out of a fairy tale. And then they ride. At first it's beautiful. Dust kicks up behind them, sabers flashing in the sun, hooves pounding like thunder. But then the machine guns open up. Horses fall, men fly from saddles like rag dolls. The line breaks in half, then in quarters. The charge doesn't reach the trench. The trenches weren't made for horses. That becomes painfully obvious the moment you're assigned near the front line. They're like jagged scars cut into the earth, narrow and wet and endlessly winding, as if someone let a mad mole dig through France with a shovel and a grudge. Your unit doesn't sleep in them, not exactly. The horses couldn't fit even if they tried, and honestly, no one wants them down there anyway. Instead, you're posted just behind the lines, close enough to be useful, far enough that you don't drown in mud every time it rains. And rain it does. Constant, cruel, sideways rain that soaks through every layer of clothing, pulls in your boots, and turns everything into a glistening mess of filth. You don't remember the last time your socks were dry, or your dignity for that matter. You get your first trench visit during a courier mission. You're ordered to deliver a message to a forward command post, and there's no getting around it. You'll need to dismount and go in on foot. You leave Dagger with another rider and slosh your way into the trench with a reluctant kind of curiosity. It's worse than you imagined. The walls sag under the weight of soaked sandbags. Planks laid across the floor sink when you step on them, sending up bubbles of something too thick and dark to be just water. Soldiers huddle in dugouts. faces streaked with grime, eyes hollow. One guy is feeding a rat, like, intentionally, with crumbs from a biscuit. The rat seems familiar with the process, standing on its hind legs like it's placing a regular order. The smell is something you're not prepared for. It's rot and sweat and something chemical underneath it all, something you can't quite name but know you'll never forget. You deliver the message, saluting an officer who looks like he hasn't slept since the war started, and climb back out as fast as you can. You sit on a rock and stare at your boots for a while. They are covered in something, but you're not going to think about what. The trench visit becomes a regular thing. Your unit starts acting as runners between command posts. Horses still play a part, especially when speed is critical. But the deeper you go into the war, the more you notice how the cavalry is being nudged sideways, like someone doesn't want to admit they've been replaced. So instead, they keep giving you jobs that have less and less to do with charging and more to do with just staying alive. Back at camp, Dagger is faring no better with the changes. He hates the mud, he hates the noise, and he definitely hates the constant smell of cordite that clings to your clothes when you come back from the line. He'll tolerate a lot, your awkward riding, your bad singing, your habit of talking to him like he's your therapist, but he draws the line at the trenches. Even walking past them now, he throws his head back and snorts like the very earth offends him. You start seeing more horses just lying down and not getting back up, not because they're injured, but because they're done. That's what one of the veterinary corpsmen tells you one night over bad tea and worse cigarettes. They just give up, he says, blowing a stream of smoke into the dark. You can fix a leg, you can't fix a spirit. There's debate over how to use the cavalry now. Command keeps changing its mind. Should you scout? Should you charge? Should you dismount and fight like infantry? Every time new orders come down, it feels like they're grasping for something that used to make sense but doesn't anymore. You train for everything and prepare for nothing. 1 week it's recon behind enemy lines. The next it's escort duty. The week after that, you're digging supply trenches with a busted shovel and blisters on your hands. Still, there's this stubborn thread that runs through your regiment. The officers talk about the spirit of the cavalry like it's a real tangible thing, something that lives in the clink of spurs and the gleam of a saber. You want to believe in it, but it's hard when your saber is rusting in its scabbard and your boots are so full of water you squish when you walk. Then there's the weird stuff, little sin ends that the world is unravelling. One night someone swears they saw a horse gallop across no man's land with no rider, completely unscathed, weaving through machine gun fire like a ghost. Another guy claims he heard bagpipes playing from an empty trench. He hadn't been drinking. Much. And once, while scouting a ruined farmhouse, you find a saddle hung neatly on a broken fence post, perfectly polished with no rider or horse in sight. You don't touch it. The unofficial word among the ranks is simple. Cavalry's dead. It just hasn't stopped twitching. You laugh along with the joke, but it burns a little. You still wear your spurs. You still brush your mount. You still practice saber drills in the early morning fog alone sometimes, slicing the air like it still matters. One day you're ordered to escort a general from HQ to a rear observation post. He insists on being taken by horse. For the image, he says. You barely suppress your eye roll. It's you, one other rider, and the general riding in full ceremonial gear, complete with polished boots and a monocle that refuses to stay put. He talks the whole time about cavalry traditions, about noble lines and battlefield honour, and you nod politely even though the sound of distant gunfire is getting louder. A shell lands about 200 yards off the path. Dagger jerks sideways but holds his footing. The general's horse bolts and throws him face first into a puddle. You help him up. He wipes his monocle with a handkerchief and declares, "Still the finest mode of transport known to man." You don't argue, but you make a note never to ride with him again. That night, back at camp, someone pins a small notice on the message board. Effective immediately, cavalry formations will prioritise reconnaissance and communications, mounted assaults discouraged unless under exceptional circumstances. The words are clinical, buried in military jargon, but the message is clear. The old way is over, mostly. You sit in the dark with your hand on Dagger's withers and listen to the distant thunder of the front line. You think about how you used to imagine galloping across open fields, sabers high, the sun shining. Now it's just mud, ghosts and orders written by men who don't have to dig trenches. But still, tomorrow you'll mount up again, because that's what you were trained to do, and because for now, they still need you, barely. You wake to rain tapping on canvas like fingers drumming out a warning. It hasn't stopped in days. Everything is soaked. Blankets, boots, breakfast. You roll over on your cot, blink grit from your eyes, and listen for the sounds that have become your new alarm clock. Distant gunfire, horses snorting, a kettle whistling half-heartedly over a sputtering flame. Dagger's ears twitch as you approach, and he lets out a low, raspy nicker that you've come to recognise as, "Where the hell have you been?" You pat his neck and mutter something about the weather. He doesn't care. You've learned how to adapt. There was no ceremony, no single moment where you realised the war had shifted beneath your feet. But looking back, the change is obvious. Your saber's still at your side, but it's more decoration now, metal jewellery that glints in the sun when there is any. You still train with it sometimes, more out of habit than hope. But the real work? It's all about the rifle now. Your regiment's been reclassified again, your cavalry in name, but you operate more like mounted infantry, ride fast, dismount, shoot, remount, disappear. The phrase "adapt or die" is muttered so often it starts to feel like part of the daily briefing. You spend more time crawling through bushes than galloping across fields. The war has narrowed its focus to trenches and machine guns, and your horse is no longer your weapon, it's your taxi. Not that anyone says it like that. Pride's still a thing. Officers still expect you to salute. They still give lectures about mobility, about the importance of discipline, about how your presence inspires morale. You try to believe it, you really do. But it's hard when the mud climbs past your ankles and the wheels of progress have all but run you over. There's a new skill you didn't expect to need. Field repair. Your rifle jams, your gear falls apart and your saddle straps rot from constant damp. You learn how to sew canvas, how to twist wire, how to patch up a saddle with nothing but twine and foul language. Dagger throws a shoe, and you spend the better part of an afternoon helping the farrier, while ankle-deep in slush and horse droppings. It's not glamorous, but you get good at it. The cavalry's not dead, it's just become a weird hybrid of soldier, mechanic and beastmaster. Food becomes another kind of strategy. Supply lines are unreliable, and rations seem to shrink each week. You learn which farms still have edible root vegetables. You trade a spare pair of socks for a jar of jam from a French widow who doesn't speak a word of English but makes the best blackcurrant preserve you've ever tasted. You share half of it with Dagger, who licks it off your hand with more grace than most of the men in your squad. Some of the newer officers try to reinvent cavalry doctrine. They talk about small unit tactics, guerrilla-style manoeuvres, fast strikes under cover of darkness. One even suggests using the horses to carry light mortars closer to the front before dismounting and firing. It sounds insane, but a week later you're helping lash mortar tubes to saddle frames. You stop being surprised. Despite everything, there are moments of strange beauty. A sunrise that turns the horizon gold, a herd of deer leaping across a broken field, the way Dagger's breath fogs in perfect clouds as you ride through the morning chill. You cling to those moments like secret photographs. They don't last, but they're proof that the world hasn't completely gone to hell. The men talk about the end of the war in different ways now, less about victory and more about survival. No one asks who's winning, no one really knows. You just keep riding missions, watching men disappear, patching holes, literal and emotional. Some never get patched. You lose a friend during a night patrol. Barnes, tall guy, always humming, took a bullet through the chest while crossing a ravine. You were 10 yards behind him. You helped drag his body out. You closed his eyes. You cleaned the blood off his saddle so it could be used again. You didn't say anything for 3 days. Dagger kept nudging your shoulder like he could feel it. Maybe he could. On the fringe of all this, there's a quiet debate among the old guard about what cavalry even is now. One captain insists mounted warfare is simply evolving. Another says it's extinct and they're just holding funerals in slow motion. You don't say anything, but you know what you've become. A relic in motion. A swordsman in a war ruled by bullets. You hear about other regiments, ones that dismounted completely, sent their horses to supply duty or worse, slaughter. The idea makes your skin crawl. You start sleeping closer to Dagger's pen just in case someone gets clever and decides he's more useful as stew. You're not above punching a quartermaster if it comes to that. One afternoon you're sent to recover a supply cache near an abandoned village. It's a skeleton of a place. Empty houses, broken wells, cracked windows that watch you like eyes. You dismount, rifle ready, nerves coiled tight. You find the cache, you also find something else. An old painting, still hanging in a parlour, half covered in soot but intact. A family, dressed in Sunday clothes, seated beside a fireplace. The father's got a moustache like a broom. The girl in the middle is holding a wooden horse. You stare at it for a long time, then walk out without touching it. Later that night, someone gets drunk and says, "You know, I think the horses understand it better than we do." No one laughs. You all just sit around the fire listening to the wind and waiting for morning. Dagger stands nearby, eyes half-lidded, tail flicking slowly like he's bored of your melodrama. And still you ride, through mud, through fog, through fields littered with shell holes. You dodge sniper fire. You whisper orders over the pounding of hooves. You become the shadow that moves just fast enough to survive. You carry wounded on your back, both literally and metaphorically. You adapt, because if you don't, this war will chew you up and forget your name. You don't realise you've been selected for the mission until your name is read out loud at morning assembly, right between Dawson and Hill. There's no fanfare, just a brisk nod from the lieutenant and a half-smudged paper in his gloved hand. Recon, behind the line, 2 days, pack light. That's it. That's all the explanation you get. You exchange a glance with Dawson, who raises an eyebrow like he's trying to decide whether this is a promotion or a death sentence. Hill just mutters something under his breath and keeps adjusting his saddle. Mounted reconnaissance used to be one of the proudest roles in the cavalry. Scouts who rode deep into enemy territory, bringing back crucial intelligence, sometimes even saving entire units from ambush or artillery fire. Now it's mostly a gamble. The terrain is ruined, maps are out of date, and the enemy has better optics, better camouflage and more traps than ever. And you go anyway, because that's the job. And because they asked you by name, you spend the next few hours preparing Dagger, checking every strap and buckle, trimming his hooves even though you did it 2 days ago. There's no room for error out there, not when the wrong sound, the wrong shine of metal could give you away. You swap your standard issue kit for a leaner load, a carbine with a shorter barrel, extra ammo pouches, a knife, a canteen, and 2 days' worth of dried meat and hard biscuits that you already hate. You wrap Dagger's metal tack in strips of cloth to muffle the noise. He doesn't like it, but he tolerates it. You whisper thanks and tell him he's the best horse in the army. It's not even a lie. The mission begins just before dusk, the sky painted in strokes of purple and bruised orange. The three of you ride out in staggered formation, using what little cover the bombed-out countryside offers. The road east is shredded, its cobblestones torn apart by shellfire and tank tracks. You veer off into the woods, thin and skeletal, where branches reach down like claws and the underbrush is a whispering carpet of dead leaves. You don't talk. It's not just for stealth, it's superstition now. Talking before you've cleared the line is like daring the war to notice you. So you ride in silence, each hoofbeat sounding impossibly loud, even with the muffling cloth. Dagger's ears flick back and forth, alert to every rustle, every distant crack. You trust him more than the maps. Honestly, you trust him more than your commanding officer. The first night is uneventful, which somehow makes it worse. Your nerves stay stretched like wire. Every breeze sounds like a footstep. Every twig snap is a rifle bolt being drawn. You camp in a shallow depression behind a crumbling stone wall. No fire, no talking. You take turns sleeping in 90-minute shifts, rifles across your chests, horses tied loosely nearby so they don't bolt if something spooks them. When it's your turn to watch, you sit in the dark and listen to Dagger breathe. It's the only sound that keeps you from unravelling. At dawn, the mist rolls in heavy, clinging to your skin and painting the world in grey watercolour. You push forward through a shattered orchard, the trees blackened and skeletal. There are apples still hanging on a few branches, miraculously untouched. You pluck one, bite into it, and immediately regret it. Mushy, sour, but it's the first fruit you've had in weeks, and that counts for something. By mid-morning you spot movement through the trees, a pair of enemy supply wagons lumbering along a narrow road. You drop low in the saddle and signal the others to halt. Hill pulls out binoculars and confirms it. German transport, lightly guarded, probably bringing ammunition or rations to a forward trench. You sketch the position on your map, mark the direction, and quietly retreat before they get too close. No confrontation, that's the rule. Your eyes, not guns this time. The map you carry, supposedly accurate to the wheat, is already a joke. Trenches are dug where none should be. Roads have vanished or been replaced by impassable mud. You're forced to backtrack twice and even cross a shallow river that nearly drowns one of the horses. Dagger handles it like a champ, though you both come out of it soaked and shivering. You rub him down with a towel that smells like mildew and gratitude. Towards sunset, things get dicey. Dawson hears something, bootsteps, close, and you all freeze behind a ridge, holding your breath. A German patrol passes not 30 feet from your hiding spot, helmets low, rifles at the ready. One of them coughs, another laughs. You tighten your grip on your carbine and think about how quickly this could turn into a running gunfight. But they don't see you. They move on. You wait 5 full minutes before moving again just to be sure. That night, you camp in the shell of a farmhouse. The roof's gone, and one wall has collapsed entirely, but there's a dry corner where you can bed down. You find an old child's toy in the rubble, wooden, broken, a wheel missing. It's shaped like a horse. You show it to Dagger. He sniffs it, then flicks his ear. Not impressed. Hill breaks the no-talking rule to quietly ask, "You think anyone lived through this?" You shrug. There's no point guessing. The war has made ghosts of everyone, even the living. The return journey is faster, less cautious. You've done your job, seen what you needed to see, marked it on the map, and now the only goal is getting back in one piece. You're nearly there, maybe an hour out from your line, when the silence explodes. A sniper. Just one shot. Hill's horse collapses in a pile of blood and broken limbs, throwing Hill hard to the ground. You dive behind a rock, heart hammering. Dawson returns fire blindly toward the tree line. You can't even see the shooter. All you hear is the awful, choked sound Hill makes as he tries to get up. He can't. You belly crawl to him, keeping low, and see that the bullet hit him high in the thigh. Bad angle, artery maybe. You apply pressure with your scarf, swear under your breath, and shout for Dawson to give covering fire while you get Hill up. It takes both of you to drag him over Dagger's back. He groans with every jolt, and Dagger dances nervously under the weight, but holds. You ride like hell, cutting across the field in a blur of hooves and gunpowder. Another shot rings out, misses you by inches. Dawson fires again and again until you're over the ridge, back behind your lines. The medics take Hill. You don't know if he'll make it. You don't ask. You just sit by Dagger, wiping his flanks down, telling him over and over, "Good boy, you saved us." And he just leans his head into your chest like he knows. When the officer asks for your report, you hand over the map and say nothing. There's no talk of glory, no cheers, just another job done, another brush with death, another reason to be grateful that your horse runs faster than fear. It starts with a limp. At first, it's barely noticeable, just a hesitation in Dagger's stride, like he's favouring his right foreleg for a moment after stepping on a patch of rough ground. You tell yourself it's nothing, maybe a stone bruise, maybe the cold. He's carried you through mud, through fear, through a sniper's bullet and back again. He deserves to limp if he wants to, but by the next morning it's worse. He has heat in the leg, swelling. He won't put his full weight on it, and when you try to lead him out for watering, he just stands there, breathing hard, his eyes dull and distant. The farrier confirms your fears. Strain, maybe a sprain. Could be worse, but it's hard to say with the mud and the way we're working them. He squats by the leg, fingers tracing tendons like reading braille. He needs rest. Real rest. Not 2 hours off between hauling recon and dodging shrapnel. You nod, jaw clenched. You know what rest means out here. 3 days if you're lucky, a bullet if you're not. You shift assignments to light duty for a few days. Camp guard, message running from HQ to the field hospitals, anything that lets Dagger stay off rough terrain. He still insists on moving, stubborn even when it hurts. You catch him trying to rise before dawn, muscle memory pulling him toward the saddle. You scold him gently, rubbing his neck. Easy boy, you don't have to prove anything. Horses are dying every day, not from bullets or shells, those are almost mercies now, but from exhaustion, disease, malnutrition. You pass the quartermaster pen on your way to chow one morning and see a line of mounts too weak to stand. One is lying flat, foam crusting around its mouth. A young soldier stands nearby, biting his lip until it bleeds, revolver shaking in his grip. A mercy shot. That's what they call it. You hope he doesn't miss. Dagger is one of the lucky ones, if that word bet still has any meaning. The vet straps his leg and gives him something to dull the pain. He's a fighter, the man says. Some of them just shut down, but not him. You nod, unable to speak, because you know if he shuts down, you'll break apart too. For a while you're grounded. You watch your squad ride out without you, hooves fading into the mist. It burns in a strange way, not because you're missing action, but because Dagger's absence makes you feel like a ghost hovering at the edge of something you once belonged to. You spend your time cleaning tack, scrubbing mud out of uniforms that'll be filthy again by nightfall, and writing letters you never send. That's when the nightmares get worse. You start dreaming in flashes, gunfire, falling horses, screams. Once you wake up gasping from a dream where you were charging an enemy trench and dagger disappeared from under you mid-gallop. You hit the ground face first and all around you was silence. No gunfire, no shouting, just an endless quiet field where everything had already died. Even the camp feels heavier now. Rumours float like smoke, whole cavalry brigades being dissolved, horses being requisitioned for labour or worse. You hear about a Polish unit that lost 70% of its mounts in a single day due to gas exposure. They didn't even see combat, just marched through the wrong valley at the wrong time. The details don't matter. The result is always the same. More graves, more names written in chalk on mess tent walls, and then rubbed away when space runs out. You start checking Dagger's leg twice a day, then 3 times. He bears the inspections with stoic patience, only occasionally flicking his ears in irritation. Slowly, painfully, he starts putting weight on it again. The swelling fades. His steps grow firmer. The light returns to his eyes little by little. You catch him nudging at your pocket one morning, looking for the sugar cube you've been rationing for him. You give it to him with a flourish, bowing like a stage magician. For the miracle recovery, you say. He chomps it with zero appreciation for the theatrics. One morning, while you're tightening his girth, your commanding officer approaches. He doesn't even glance at you, just nods at Dagger and says, "He's back in rotation. We've got a priority dispatch. Need speed." You try to argue, say the leg's not fully healed, say you'll take another mount. He doesn't listen, just hands you the sealed envelope and walks off. You mount up, your heart beating somewhere deep in your throat. Dagger feels solid beneath you, but you're still watching every step. The ride is fast, 30 kilometres of battered countryside, winding roads, broken bridges, and field checkpoints where sentries barely look up as you pass. You push him harder than you want to. Every hoofbeat is a mix of fear and prayer. But he runs like he's got something to prove, like he knows. When you reach the forward post, your legs are jelly and your hands are numb. The officer you hand the dispatch to looks barely older than 16, with acne blooming across his cheeks and a jaw that quivers when he tries to thank you. You nod, barely hearing the words, and turn back toward camp. The ride home is slower. You stop halfway to water Dagger at a stream, and he lowers his head gratefully. You sit beside him and listen to the water, to the birds, to the sound of a world that somehow still exists outside the gunfire. And then you cry. Not the sobbing, heaving kind, just a quiet, persistent flow that refuses to stop. You bury your face in your hands, and Dagger stands there, motionless, guarding you like you're worth protecting. No medals, no trumpet, just this horse who won't leave your side no matter how broken you are. Later that week, word arrives that the supply convoy your dispatch helped reroute avoided an ambush. 10 wagons, 40 men. None of them knew your name, and they never will. But they're alive. And so is your horse, and for now, so are you. There's talk of moving your unit again. Somewhere quieter, they say. Less shelling, more scouting. But you've learnt not to trust promises. You just keep brushing Dagger every night, telling him what a good boy he is, and whispering about green pastures you'll never see. He listens, always listens, and tomorrow you'll ride again. It happens just before dawn when the sky is still the colour of wet ash and the world hasn't yet decided whether to wake up or go back to sleep. You and your unit are stationed near a ridgeline, tucked behind a curtain of scraggly trees and broken stone walls. The fog lies thick across the fields, swallowing shapes whole and making even your own hands look like strangers. You're cinching Dagger's saddle, yawning into your collar when the order comes down in hushed tones. A charge. You freeze. Not a recon run, not another courier job, a charge. The officer delivering the order, young, clean, too proud for someone so clueless, explains that enemy troops are dug in along a shallow hill not far from here. He says they're under-equipped, low on ammo, morale crumbling. A sharp push, he calls it. Fast, overwhelming force, shock and awe. He says it like he's reading from a manual that forgot to include machine guns and barbed wire. Your stomach turns. You want to argue, scream, beg for logic, but there's no room for that here. You just nod and walk back to Dagger, whose breath steams in the morning cold. You rest your forehead against his and mutter, "We're actually going to do it. A real charge." He flicks his ear in irritation, like he knows how bad of an idea this is. The preparations are grim. 24 riders, including yourself, line up in formation just beyond the fog. Every hoof step echoes louder than it should. Sabers are checked, even though you know they're basically ceremonial at this point. Carbines loaded, pistols holstered, no one talks. A few glance sideways at each other, offering tight nods, like men sharing their last thoughts without having to say them aloud. You mount up. Dagger feels tense, coiled like a spring under the saddle. You grip the reins tight, your fingers shaking. Not from the cold. You can feel his heart beating through your legs. Fast, fierce, ready. The captain rides to the front. He says something about valor, about the traditions of cavalry. You barely hear it over the sound of your pulse hammering in your ears. Then he raises his saber and shouts a single word, forward. And then you're moving. The world shifts, mud flies, hooves pound. Riders surge ahead in a line, some already crying out, sabers drawn, coats flapping like wings. The wind hits your face, cold and alive. Dagger explodes beneath you, fast and focused, eating the ground with terrifying speed. For 1 second, just one, you feel the old glory. The ancient thunder, the wind howling in your ears, the exhilaration of speed, the drumbeat of hooves across open fields. It's exactly what you imagined before the war. A cavalry charge in full gallop. You could almost believe in heroism again. Then the machine guns open fire. The first rounds strike the front of the column like a hammer on glass. The horse screams, long and high, and goes down in a heap, its rider flung like a doll into the air. Someone beside. You jerk backward, blood spraying in a fine mist. Still the line pushes forward. You urge Dagger on, barely dodging a fallen mount. Barbed wire looms ahead. Someone in front tries to leap it, but catches a hoof, tumbling end over end into a tangle of limbs and shrieks. You steer left, looking for a gap. You find one. Narrow, treacherous, but Dagger clears it with inches to spare. Then it's close-range chaos. Some riders make it to the trench, others fall before they get there. You see sabers flash, hear shouts in English and German, horses rearing and kicking in panic. You don't even try to draw your blade. You fire your carbine into the smoke, barely aiming, then drop it and pull your pistol. The trench looms, lined with shocked enemy soldiers, some scrambling for rifles, others frozen in disbelief. You fire twice, empty the revolver, and realise you're screaming. Not words, just noise. Pure noise. Dagger turns on command, hooves skidding in the mud. You make it back over the wire, dodging bodies and craters. Your heart in your throat. The air is thick with smoke and blood. You don't look behind you, you just ride. When you finally reach cover again, only a fraction of your unit returns with you. Riders limp in, bleeding, shell-shocked, their horses lathered and shaking. The captain is gone, so are Dawson, Leland, and half the boys you shared breakfast with just hours ago. You slide off Dagger and collapse beside him, your legs refusing to hold you up. He stands there panting, legs trembling but somehow unbroken. You wrap your arms around his neck and bury your face in his mane. He smells like sweat and gunpowder and the faintest trace of your sugar ration. He didn't flinch, not once. He carried you through hell again. There's no speech, no ceremony. The survivors sit in silence, some patching wounds, others just staring at the ground. A medic stitches a rider's shoulder while another tries to dig a shallow grave with a helmet. Someone plays a harmonica, terribly, but no one tells them to stop. The reports call it a partial success. You reached the trench. You disrupted the enemy's supply line. No mention of how many died to do it. No mention of the horses. That night, while tending to Dagger's cuts, you hear an officer laugh in the next tent and say, "It almost worked." You walk away before you punch someone. The next day you ride again. Not into a charge, just another dispatched HQ. But every step Dagger takes reminds you of the thunder of that field, the gunfire, the bodies, the wire. The ghosts you left behind. They say cavalry is dead. Maybe they're right. Maybe that charge was its last breath. But you were there. You rode through it. And as long as Dagger walks beside you, you carry it with you. The sound, the blood, the fury, and that one impossible second where, for the first time in a long time, you believed. There's a sound horses make when they're deeing, high, desperate, raw. You hear it before you see anything, a shriek rising over the thunder of artillery like the final cry of something ancient. It slices through your chest in a way bullets never could. The battlefield is loud already, too loud to think, too loud to pray, but that sound cuts through it all. You'd rather not know what makes that sound, but you do now. You'll never forget it. The world around you is chaos. The smoke is thick enough to chew, the ground so churned up that it doesn't resemble ground anymore. It's more like the open wound of the earth, wet, steaming, foul. You're not even sure what day it is, only that you're supposed to be helping evacuate the wounded from a forward trench that barely qualifies as one anymore. It's more of a ditch with aspirations. Dagger moves carefully now. He steps around craters, over bodies, through mud that tries to suck the boots off your feet. He's become an expert in caution, his head low, his flanks slick with sweat and grime. You whisper directions into his ear, not because he needs them, he's smarter than most of the men out here, but because it calms you, keeps you tethered to something alive. You're riding with 2 other cavalrymen. You each have makeshift stretchers strapped behind your saddles, cobbled together from spare canvas and wood. The idea is simple. Load the wounded, get them back to the field hospital, then return, like you're a delivery service for the broken. Simple in theory. In practice, it's a slog through hell. One slow step at a time. The first man you load is unconscious, thank God. His leg is gone, wrapped in a filthy bandage that already smells wrong. You slide him gently onto the stretcher, trying not to jostle him too much. Dagger stands still through it all, steady as a statue. He even turns his head slightly to nuzzle the man's arm, like he's checking to see if he's still breathing. You feel that lump in your throat again and swallow hard. By midday, you've made 3 runs. You're numb to most of it now, bodies groaning, men begging, the colour of blood on wool. You stop reacting to the smell, you stop looking anyone in the eye. You focus on the next step, the next patient, the next 10 yards of mud, 1 foot in front of the other, or 4 hooves in Dagger's case. Then something goes wrong. You're halfway back to the trench when a shell lands too close, just behind you, close enough to throw you forward in the saddle. Dirt sprays into your face, something sharp slices your cheek, and Dagger bucks. A desperate, terrified leap sideways that nearly unseats you. The man on the stretcher moans weakly. You grab the reins, haul them in, whisper soothing nonsense into Dagger's ear while trying to figure out if you're bleeding or just scared. The shell didn't hit you. Not directly, but it did hit something else. You turn and see the second horse, Jameson's mount, lying on its side, legs twitching, mouth frothing. Its rider was alive, crawling away with blood streaking down one arm, but the horse isn't going anywhere. Its flank is torn open, exposing ribs, muscle, and something that might have once been a lung. It's still making that awful sound, that pleading animal scream that says, "Please end this." Jameson stumbles toward it, revolver in hand. His face is pale, jaw tight. He drops to his knees beside the horse, muttering something you can't hear. He puts the gun to its temple, closes his eyes, and fires. The scream stops, just like that. Gone. You don't speak on the way back. Jameson walks. His arm's worse than he admits, but he won't accept a stretcher. He says he owes it to the horse to walk the full distance. No one argues. Later, when the medics take the wounded man from your stretcher, you lead Dagger to the riverbank behind the field hospital and strip off his tack. You rub him down slowly, your hands trembling as you work. He's trembling too, his muscles taut, his eyes glassy and dark. You kneel in front of him and rest your forehead against his chest. He doesn't move, doesn't flinch, just stands there like he knows you need this. You start talking, you don't even realise you're doing it at first, but the words just spill out. About the mission, about Jameson's horse, about how you're scared this will be your last stretch of solid ground. You tell him you're sorry for everything, for bringing him here, for surviving when so many others didn't, for not knowing how to make any of it mean something. Dagger just breathes, slow and steady, like he's anchoring you to reality. That night, you volunteer for guard duty. You don't want to sleep. You don't want to dream about dying horses or trenches that eat the living. You just sit beside Dagger, your rifle across your lap, watching the moon rise through a break in the clouds. It's beautiful, almost offensively so, like the sky forgot what's happening on the ground. You remember something your old sergeant once said during training: "A cavalryman without his horse is just a fool with a sword." You used to think it was a joke. Now it feels like a curse. There's a new guy in camp, a replacement from somewhere up north. He's fresh-faced, too clean, still says sir without sarcasm. He asks if cavalry charges are as glorious as the newspapers say. You laugh so hard you nearly choke on your coffee. He doesn't ask again. In the days that follow, you stop seeing Dagger as just a mount. You always knew he was more than that, smarter, tougher, probably more decent than most of the people around you. But now it hits differently. You start treating him like a partner, not just brushing him or feeding him, but talking to him, asking his opinion like he might answer. Some of the other soldiers joke about it. You don't care. You know what you've been through together. And you know deep down it's not over. Because this war still has teeth. Still has bombs to drop and lives to take. And you'll keep riding, even if it's just to pull the wounded out of the fire. Because someone has to. And because you're not leaving him behind. Not ever. You made a promise after all. You don't expect it. Not here. Not now. But it happens anyway. Like most things in this war, with no warning and less logic. It starts as a letter, folded twice, edges frayed, tucked into your rations pouch by someone in the supply tent. There's no name on the envelope, just your unit number and a smudge of ink where rain or fingers wore it down. You almost throw it away. You're used to stray papers. Orders, reports, casualty lists. None of them ever bring good news. But this isn't a report, it's a letter, from her. You sit on an overturned crate behind the stables and read it by the early morning light. Boots damp from dew, Dagger munching on hay nearby. The words are shaky, the handwriting half familiar. You squint at the curves of the ink, and it starts to click into place. A girl from back home, Anna. You'd spoken once, maybe twice before the war. She worked at the bakery across from the train station. You helped her pick up a bag of spilled flour and made a joke about being knighted for your efforts. She laughed. You meant to go back, but then you left. Apparently she remembered. She writes about the village, about how everything's quieter now, slower, like even time is cautious these days. She tells you that the shop still opens every morning, even when no one buys anything, that she lights a candle every Sunday, even though she doesn't know what for anymore. And somehow through all that, she asks how you are. You read the letter twice, then a third time, then you fold it carefully and tuck it inside your jacket, next to your skin, as if that might warm you more than any fire ever could. You don't write back immediately. You don't know what to say. How do you describe what you've become? How do you explain the cold that never leaves your bones, or the way your hands shake even when you're still? You think about telling her the truth, the blood, the bodies, the way you flinch when you hear thunder, because it might not be thunder. But then you imagine her reading it, imagining you like that. So you wait. Days pass. Then weeks. You find yourself watching the mail runs like a dog watches a door. Every knock at the mess tent makes your heart jump in a way no rifle fire does. You hate how much you care. You hate how much it helps, she writes again. This time the letter smells faintly like cinnamon. You have no idea how, but it does. She writes about how the town clock is broken and how the silence at night is loud in its own way. She writes that she saw a star fall the other night and thought of you, that she hopes, wherever you are, you're still riding and not stuck in some hole in the ground. You laugh, actually laugh, when you read that. You are, in fact, currently stuck in a hole. It's not much bigger than a horse stall and smells suspiciously like someone used it as a latrine last week. But you're also alive, and that's something. You decide to write back. Your first letter is awkward, stiff. You start 3 times and end up scratching out entire paragraphs. Eventually you just write what you know. Dagger is still alive. The mud is still awful. You saw a pigeon take a direct hit from a mortar and are convinced it was trying to spy on you. You don't say you're scared, but you do say you miss bread that doesn't come in a tin. You hope she reads between the lines. The letters continue. Not often, not predictably, but they come. She writes about spring arriving, how the trees by the river are starting to bloom again. You tell her about the foal born to a draft mare at the quartermaster's camp. Gangly, fuzzy, unsure of its own legs. You start including small sketches in the margins. Dagger's head, the outline of a ruined chapel, the stars over camp when everything is quiet for once. You pretend your fingers don't tremble while you draw. Word gets around, of course, you're the guy with the letter girl now. One of your squad mates starts calling her the Cinnamon Saint. You don't mind. They've seen you during the worst of it. Let them see this too. Something human. And somehow, amid all the horror, you fall in love. It's a strange, distant kind of love, carried on ink and imagination, half built from memory and half from the space between your words. But it's real as anything else you've clung to in this nightmare. You picture her when the shells start falling. You think about her voice when the sky turns orange with fire. You imagine her waiting for you. Maybe it's foolish. Maybe it's the only thing keeping you from disappearing completely. One night you find a quiet spot under a collapsed barn roof and try to describe her to Dagger. She's got ink-stained fingers and you tell him, writes like she's trying to stitch broken things back together. He blinks slowly, chewing a mouthful of hay. No offence, you add, but she might be the only thing in this war prettier than you. He swishes his tail and gives you a look that says I know. A few weeks later another letter arrives. This one's different, shorter. The handwriting messier. She writes that her cousin was drafted, that the bakery is closed more often now, that the nights feel colder even though it's spring. She ends it with, come home soon, or just come home. You don't sleep that night. You just sit with the letter and stare at the fire, heart twisting in ways you can't explain. Because you don't know if you can come home. You don't know if there will even be a home by the time this ends, but suddenly you want it more than anything. Not for glory, not even for peace, just for a chance to walk through that bakery door, flower in the air and say something dumb enough to make her laugh again. The next morning you're sent back out on another recon run. It's dangerous, long, and drenched in cold fog. But you ride with something new in your chest. Not hope, not exactly, but something close to it. A compass, maybe. A reminder. Dagger seems to feel it too. His pace is lighter, his ears perked. You ride in silence, letter tucked close to your heart, and for once the battlefield feels a little less endless. You might not survive this war, but for the first time in a long time you remember why you want to. Every now and then the war decides to take a breath. Not often, not for long, and never entirely. But sometimes, if you're lucky, there's a lull. A day without artillery, an hour without screaming. A morning where the sky stays quiet and the horizon doesn't look like it's on fire. You get one of those rare gifts just as your unit rotates off the line for a week of rest. Rest in the military sense, meaning patch yourself up, mend what's left of your gear, and try to remember how to be a human being again before someone starts yelling orders. You're moved back to a small town a few miles from the front. What's left of it, anyway. The buildings are still standing, technically, but every rooftop has at least one hole, most windows are shattered, and the town square has been reduced to a crater bordered by what used to be benches. Still, it's the closest thing you've seen to civilization in months. There's a church with a leaning bell tower, a few intact fireplaces, and even somehow a functioning tavern. You and the others stable your horses in what used to be the schoolhouse. The chalkboards are still on the walls, scrawled with lessons that ended abruptly when the war rolled in. You tether Dagger in the teacher's corner, where the floorboards creak like they're thinking about collapsing. He doesn't seem to mind. He sniffs at the chalk tray, finds a carrot stub someone left behind, and eats it like he owns the place. The tavern is run by a woman named Colette, who speaks mostly French and absolutely zero nonsense. She serves wine in chipped teacups and makes a kind of stew that smells suspiciously like pigeon. But you'd eat it even if she told you it was rat. It's hot. It's real. It tastes like something your body forgot it needed. The first night off duty feels surreal. You sit with your squad around a small table in the corner, your uniform stiff with dried mud and smoke. Someone finds an old phonograph, winds it up, and it starts to wheeze out a tinny waltz. The notes sound distant, like they're being played underwater, but somehow it makes your chest ache. You're on your second cup of wine when a piano starts playing in the other room. Just a few tentative notes at first, hesitant, like someone relearning how to move their fingers. Then it builds into something warmer, steadier. It's not perfect, but it's beautiful in a broken way. You get up and wander toward the sound, and that's when you see her. Anna. No, not really, but for one suspended second your brain convinces you it's her, until the stranger turns and smiles politely, and you realise she just has the same dark hair, the same quiet intensity in her eyes. You feel something loosen in your chest anyway, something you didn't know was knotted up. The pianist, her name's Lisette, you later learn, is a Belgian refugee, barely 20, who used to play in a cafe in Brussels. She doesn't talk much, but her fingers do all the speaking. She plays like someone trying to remember joy by reconstructing it one note at a time. You stay in the doorway, listening, half drunk and half dreaming, until someone calls you back to the table. Later that night, with your stomach full and your muscles beginning to unclench for the first time in weeks, you wander back to the schoolhouse and find Dagger lying down in the straw, snoring softly. You lie beside him, using your saddlebag as a pillow, and stare up through a hole in the roof. Stars peek through, faint, flickering, and so absurdly peaceful that you want to laugh. You almost do. You wake to the smell of fresh bread. At first you think you're dreaming, but no. Colette managed to trade something, or someone dropped off supplies, and now she's baking in the old bakery next to the tavern. The scent drifts through the town like a warm memory. You grab a crusty heel with some kind of cheese on it and eat it on the porch of the post office, which now functions as mail central, triage overflow, and general gossip hub. There's a new letter from Anna. It's short, rushed, but full of little sparks. She writes about planting onions in a window box, even though the frost might kill them. She writes about a dog that wandered into town, bone-thin and barking at shadows, but who now follows her around like a bodyguard. She writes, "I heard they might send you west next. Please write back, tell me you're not." You fold the letter carefully and don't answer right away. Instead, you walk to the edge of town where the river runs under a half-broken bridge. You sit with your boots in the water and think about what you'd say if you were honest. That you're tired all the time, even when you're still. That sometimes, when it gets quiet, you feel like the world is holding its breath to see who dies next. That you miss her so much it physically aches. Instead, you write, "We've got a week off. They fed us bread. I think Dagger misses you, even though he's never met you. I told him you like stars and cinnamon. He thinks you sound stubborn. You sign it with a smile you don't feel, but maybe she will." That night, Lisette plays again. This time she plays something light, playful even. Someone claps along, someone else stands and, half joking, half serious, offers a hand to dance. A few of you pair off, awkwardly two-stepping across a floor that creaks like it might give out. You don't dance, you sit in the corner with a chipped cup of wine and close your eyes. Just for a minute. You dream of home, but not how it was, how it might be. A table, a dog, a woman with ink-stained fingers laughing over burned bread. A horse, your horse, in the field rolling in the grass like a colt. You wake to rain. Of course, the week goes too fast. You rebuild your tack, polish your boots, re-oil your carbine. You help a local boy repair a fence around his family's garden. You even fix the bell in the church tower, not because anyone told you to, but because the silence up there felt unfinished. When the orders finally come to move out, no one's surprised. You pack in silence. Dagger's saddle goes on a little tighter this time, every strap checked twice. You tuck Anna's latest letter into your breast pocket. It rests against your heart like armour. As you ride out of the town, you turn once to look back. Lisette is at the window of the tavern waving. Colette stands on the porch, arms crossed, pretending not to care. The bell you fixed rings once, sharp and clear. Dagger walks like he knows the way forward might not have music or cinnamon or dancing. But for 1 week it did, and that will have to be enough. You knew the Eastern Front would be different, but you didn't know how different until you stepped off the train and the air hit you like a slap. It's sharper here, wilder. Everything smells of pine, ash, and something faintly metallic, like the wind is dragging blood with it. Snow falls in lazy drifts, thick enough to blanket the noise, but thin enough to remind you that the cold is here to stay. Your breath fogs the instant it leaves your lips. Dagger exhales once, then stamps his foot unimpressed. You pat his flank and mutter, "Welcome to Russia." Your unit has been reassigned, temporarily they say, to assist with supply routes and flank patrols somewhere deep in the Galician wilderness. You've been promised that, unlike in the West, cavalry still has a bite here, that the terrain favours mobility, that the enemy isn't buried under 100 layers of barbed wire and concrete. But you've learnt not to believe in promises anymore. You believe in your horse, you believe in frostbite, you believe in keeping your rifle dry and your feet moving. Everything else is optional. Your first impression of the Eastern Front is that it's bigger. Not just in distance, though the distances are laughably vast, but in feeling. The sky stretches forever. The forests go on like they were designed by someone with a grudge against maps. You ride for hours without seeing another soul. When you do, it's often a shape in the distance, friend or foe, you can't tell. And sometimes it's a shape that doesn't move at all. You join up with a mixed cavalry detachment that includes Polish Uklans, French liaison officers, and, most terrifying of all, a handful of Russian Cossacks. The first time you see one ride, you understand immediately why people fear them. The man gallops full speed through a frozen grove, swings off the saddle at an angle that seems to defy gravity, fires his revolver without breaking stride and yells something guttural you don't dare translate. His horse doesn't even blink. The man's hat is fur, his coat is patched, and his eyes are gleaming like he hasn't felt fear since birth. The Cossacks keep to themselves mostly, but they tolerate you. Barely. They watch you and Dagger with the quiet judgment of people who know your saddle is too clean, your stance too western, your horse too soft, but Dagger surprises them. He moves through snow like it's just another version of mud. He doesn't flinch at gunfire, and after 3 days, one of the Cossacks, Grigory, you think, grunts and nods in your direction. Approval, or at least the absence of disdain. It's hard to tell with Cossacks. You learn fast that the Eastern Front plays by its own rules. There are fewer trenches and more trees. The fighting is sudden, close and personal. Ambushes are common. So is frostbite. You sleep with your boots on, your rifle in your lap, and a blanket of Peasant over Dagger's back just to keep him from freezing. You learn to listen to the wind, to read the shifting light between trees, to spot the unnatural evidence that comes just before everything goes wrong. Your first engagement happens in the middle of nowhere, because everything here is the middle of nowhere. You're on a supply run with a group of Uchlans when you ride into a clearing and see the first signs: crushed snow, broken branches, fresh tracks. You're still scanning when the first shots ring out from the tree line. Men scream, horses rear. One of the French officers goes down, throat open. You don't think, you ride. You and Dagger cut through the clearing like an arrow. You fire as you go, 2 shots, maybe 3, before you wheel around a fallen log and find cover. The Cossacks respond like wolves. They flank wide, circling, disappearing into the trees and reappearing like ghosts. One of them hurls a saber into a man's chest, then vanishes again. The fight lasts only minutes, but when it's over, your breath is gone, your legs are shaking and your ears are ringing from the closeness of it all. Later, someone mutters, "They don't fight like men, they fight like beasts." You're not sure if they mean the Cossacks or the enemy, maybe both. Afterward, the snow falls again, soft, erasing everything. The blood, the footprints, the spent casings, all swallowed by white. You ride back in Sjötnäs, your hand clenched tight around Dagger's reins, trying to keep the tremble out of your voice when you whisper thanks into his ear. The camp here is less structured, more improvisational. Fires are lit wherever there's shelter from the wind. Meals are cooked in a communal pot, usually turnips and mystery meat, though no one asks for specifics. At night, the wind howls through the trees like it has unfinished business. You huddle in your coat, sip from a tin cup of vodka passed around the fire, and listen to the Cossacks tell stories. You don't understand the language, but the rhythm of it, the sharpness of their laughter, tells you everything you need to know. These men have danced with death so often they've stopped treating it like a stranger. You see things here that never made it to the Western papers. A child wandering barefoot through the trees, eyes wide and glassy, wearing a soldier's jacket that drags on the ground. A church used as an execution site, its stained glass windows now black with soot. Once you find an entire patrol frozen in place, horses still upright, eyes glassy, their riders slumped forward like they fell asleep mid-prayer. Frost did that. Not bullets, not bombs, just the cold. And yet there's still humanity. One night, a Polish trooper plays a fiddle he's carried since Warsaw, the sound fragile and sweet beneath the crackle of firewood. A Russian officer offers you half of his last cigarette. You don't speak a word in common, but you both nod. That's enough. Even Dagger seems different here. Quieter, more alert. He moves through snow with the patience of something older than war. You catch a Cossack stroking his neck one morning, murmuring something in Russian. When he sees you watching, he grunts, "Strong spirit." You nod. You know, by the end of your tour on the Eastern Front, you're exhausted in new ways. Not just physically, but spiritually. Like the land itself has pulled something from you and kept it. But you've also gained something, some harder piece of yourself forged in snow and silence. And Dagger somehow looks stronger too. When you receive orders to return west, it feels like waking from a fever dream. You pack your gear, say goodbye to men who don't hug, don't shake hands, just nod once. You mount up and Dagger turns without hesitation, heading toward a different kind of war. You ride back into the mud, the trenches, the structured chaos of the Western Front, with frost still on your coat and silence still in your ears. And though you've been fighting for years now, it feels like you're starting over. Because you've learned how small cavalry really is, how small you are, but also how fierce a horse can be, how loud a fiddle can sound in the middle of a frozen forest, and how the war never ends. It just changes accents. You feel the Cossacks before you hear them. It's like the wind shifts when they arrive. Colder, louder, wilder. They don't ride so much as consume the terrain, blurring through forests, across frozen rivers, over snowdrifts like their horses are made of fire and teeth. You've ridden with them for a few days now, and already you're questioning every assumption you ever had about horsemanship. These men don't ride for duty, they ride for the sheer thrill of it, like death's just another horse trying to keep up. You, Dagger, and the others from your detachment are guests, technically, or maybe stray dogs taken in for the season. The Cossacks don't speak much English, just enough to bark orders or curse your saddle technique, but they welcome you the only way they know how: vodka, stories shouted across the fire, and brutal honesty. If they like you, they'll fight beside you. If they don't, they'll just leave you behind. There's no middle ground. Their camp is a madman's blend of Spartan and chaotic. Tents thrown wherever there's space, horses staked loosely so they can roam, and weapons, sabers, rifles, knives the size of your forearm, laid out in the snow as if the cold might bless them. You're used to regiments where everything has a label, a rule, a time slot. Here, everything runs on instinct. It's unsettling and liberating. Grigory, the one who first nodded at Dagger weeks ago, has taken a mild interest in you. Or maybe just in Dagger. He watches you ride like he's grading a test. If you fall behind in formation, he spits on the ground. If you perform a clean turn in thick snow, he grunts once, which you've come to recognise as the Cossack version of applause. You try not to take it personally when he calls your saber a butter knife. The next day, he tosses you a curved shashka from his own saddle pack. A single-edged blade, beautifully balanced, wickedly sharp. "Try not to drop it," he says in broken English, already galloping away. You do your best not to disappoint. The missions here are nothing like the West. No fixed lines, no trenches, just fluid skirmishes, fast raids, sabotage runs. One night you ride out with a dozen Cossacks to intercept a German supply sled, making its way through a mountain pass. It's snowing so hard you can barely see your own horse's ears, but somehow the Cossacks cut through it like wolves in a storm. You follow as best you can, heart thudding, breath freezing in your throat. When the attack begins, it's over in seconds. Gunshots pop like fireworks, sabers flash. The sled team never stands a chance. By the time you dismount, it's done. Supplies seized, guards gone, the road smeared with crimson streaks. One of the Cossacks pulls a bottle of schnapps from the sled, uncorks it with his teeth, and passes it around like it's just another Tuesday. You're shaken, but you drink anyway. There's a rhythm to life here. Ride, eat, fight, ride again. Days blend together, marked only by how many fingers you can still feel. At night, you sit around the fire and listen to stories you barely understand. One of the older Cossacks claims he once rode straight through a shell burst and came out with his beard singed, but otherwise untouched. Another swears he killed a man by throwing his horse at him. You're not sure if he's kidding. No one laughs. The oddest part is how calm the horses are. You expect them to be wild, jumpy, spooked by all the noise and movement. But they're not. They're fearless, or maybe just resigned. They charge into gunfire like they've decided fate is someone else's problem. Dagger has started to mirror them. He used to flinch at distant cracks, but now he just lowers his head and keeps moving. He's learning their rhythm. So are you. Then one night something strange happens. You're sitting by the fire sharpening the shashka Grigory gave you, when a young Cossack, no older than 16, sits beside you and starts speaking. Broken English, thick with accent, but clear enough to understand. He tells you his name is Misha, that his brother died last winter in a failed assault across the Dniester River, that he now rides to honour him. Then, with no warning, he reaches into his coat and pulls out a folded photograph. It's old, creased, and stained with something that might be blood. A woman and a child. "My family," he says. "Gone now. Germans." You don't know what to say. You just nod. Then you reach into your own coat and pull out Anna's latest letter. You don't hand it to him. You just hold it up. "My reason," you say. He nods. No more words needed. The fire crackles between you. In the following days, the bond grows. You and the Cossacks begin to operate as one, riding in perfect sync. You learn their hand signals, their wordless warnings, the way they lean in their saddles to direct their horses without speaking. You teach them a few tricks from your own training: tight turns, rapid dismount drills, how to make a saddle last twice as long with a few clever straps and a lot of hope. They pretend not to be impressed, but you catch them copying you later. There's still danger, of course. Every ride could be your last. Once you're ambushed by a sniper hiding in a treetop. The shot misses by inches, and you watch Grigory wheel his horse around fire once and drop the man with a single shot. No celebration, no comment, just another mile to go. Another time Dagger stumbles in a frozen ditch and you think you're both going down. But he rights himself with a lurch that nearly dislocates your shoulder. You fall anyway. The world spins, snow swallows you. But before you can even shout, Dagger's head appears beside you, nudging your arm, pulling at your coat like he's trying to wake you from a nightmare. You climb back on, gasping. "Good boy," you whisper over and over. "Good boy." Eventually the orders come to head west again. The unit is needed elsewhere, some desperate plan involving new trenches, new fronts, new madness. You don't want to leave, not really. There's a part of you that's found something here, something raw and real and older than uniforms. But orders are orders. The Cossacks don't say goodbye, not in words. Grigory tosses you a fresh blanket for Dagger. Misha gives you a bullet he carved a cross into. Another rider simply nods and rides off into the fog. You do the same. That's how it works here. As you ride west through snow that thins into slush, into mud, into fields that remember too much, you glance back only once. The forest is still there. The wind still howls. Somewhere behind you, wild men on wild horses are still charging into history, like it owes them something. And ahead of you, a different kind of hell waits. Again. By now, the front looks less like a battlefield and more like a graveyard that never stops expanding. Everything is darker, heavier. Even the sky feels bruised. You're back on the Western Front. And the war here has aged like wine in reverse, bitterer, thicker, harder to swallow. The trenches are deeper, the mud stickier. The guns never stop. But you're not a trench rat. Not exactly. You've got a job again, one of the oldest and most dangerous in the book, mounted messenger. They give you the assignment with a strange mix of sympathy and practicality, like they know what they're asking. Some officer with more medals than facial expressions hands you a set of satchels and says, "They'll only send you when it's too urgent for radio," which is military for when it's so bad we can't afford delay and so chaotic no wire will survive it. You ride alone now mostly. You carry orders between forward units, sometimes to command posts, sometimes from one dugout to another in terrain, too twisted for signal cables or telegraph lines. Sometimes it's a letter confirming supply lines. Sometimes it's an order for retreat. Once it's a note scribbled in pencil that simply reads, "We're out of morphine. Please hurry." It's like being a ghost on horseback. The first run is the worst. The enemy knows messengers still exist, and they hate them with the kind of passion usually reserved for traitors and rats. If they catch you, snipers, artillery, spotters, they take the shot, fast and final. So you move like smoke, hug the terrain, cut through bomb craters and broken fences, ride fete, duck low, don't think. Dagger, as always, is better at this than you are. He seems to know where to put his hooves before you even pull the reins. He can smell the cordite in the air and lean away from it before the shells land. He's not afraid of explosions anymore, just barbed wire. You share that fear. You carry your first dispatch to a platoon dug in at the edge of a smashed village. What used to be a chapel, now just a bell tower leaning over a pit. The moment you dismount, a shell lands 20 yards behind you. The concussion knocks you forward, and for a moment everything turns to static. But Dagger doesn't move. He's breathing hard, tail low, but he stands his ground while the dust settles. You run the dispatch into the trench, ducking under timber beams, your boots slipping on duckboards soaked with God knows what. The officer who takes it barely glances at you, just snaps the seal and mutters, "About damn time." No one says thank you. They don't need to. The fact that you made it is thanks enough. On the ride back, you take a new route. You have to. The path you came in on no longer exists. A shell crater now yawns where the road was, and a horse half buried in the mud marks the spot like a silent warning. You steer wide. The mud sucks at your boots. You lean forward and whisper nonsense to Dagger, words that mean nothing, but sound like protection. You make it back to camp in one piece, and someone actually claps you on the back. Lucky, they say. You don't argue. After that, it becomes routine. If you can call anything routine out here, new orders, new routes, always with that stomach-knotting uncertainty. You get good at reading the land. You can spot artillery flash and count the seconds before impact. You learn the patterns of enemy patrols, the shortcuts through hedgerows that aren't yet full of mines. You move at odd hours, sometimes before dawn, sometimes in the middle of the night, when the fog wraps around you like a blanket made of ghosts. You start to hear stories about other messengers, one who rode straight through a mortar barrage and lived, another who carried orders in his mouth after being shot in the arm. There's even a rumour about a horse that delivered a dispatch on its own after the rider died, just showed up at camp with a bloody pouch and a mission completed. You want to believe that one, you really do. Once, you get caught in a rain of shrapnel that tears your saddlebag and slices through your coat. You keep riding. You don't even realise you're bleeding until you reach the checkpoint and hand over a dispatch with a shaking hand. The corporal says, "Jesus, sit down!" But you wave him off and start checking Dagger's legs for cuts. He's got a scrape on one flank, but he's otherwise untouched. You're not surprised. He's bulletproof, or close enough. Another time you find a soldier wandering the field. Shell shock clearly. He's barefoot, mumbling about flowers and someone named Elsie. You guide him onto Dagger's back and lead them both out of the blast zone. When you finally get him to safety, he thanks the horse, not you. You don't take it personally. If Dagger had hands, he'd be the one holding the pen when you write your name. Despite the risk, the job changes you. You get stronger, sharper. You begin to feel every movement of your horse, every shift in the wind, every new scent in the air. You become the thread between scattered pieces of a broken front, and Dagger is the needle pulling you through. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you get another letter. Anna writes about watching the sunrise from the bakery roof. She says the world smells like rising dough and frost, and that sometimes she closes her eyes and imagines you're home already, sleeping on the porch with the dog curled at your feet. She signs off with, "Whatever you're doing, come back from it. Please." You fold it carefully, place it in the inside pocket of your jacket next to the bullet with the cross Misha gave you, and carry it like a second set of ribs. The next dispatch is marked critical. You're to deliver it across a heavily shelled sector, midday, with little to no support. The officer says, "If you don't ride it, no one will." You look at Dagger. He snorts and tosses his head like he's ready already. You ride like fire, through fog, through open field, through zones where the air itself feels like it wants to tear you apart. Machine gun rounds stitch the dirt near your heels. Mortar blasts fling smoke into your path. But Dagger never hesitates. Not once. You both ride like the devils on your trail, and salvation is just over the next hill. And when you reach the trench, alive, breathless, shaking, you hand the dispatch to a stunned lieutenant who says, "How the hell did you get through that?" You don't answer. You just turn, stroke Dagger's neck, and ride back into the smoke. The first time they issue you a gas mask for Dagger, you think it's a joke. It looks like something a mad tailor stitched together during a thunderstorm. Leather straps, rubber flaps, strange metal canisters that hang from the sides like it's trying to pick up radio signals from hell. You laugh at it at first, holding it up and saying, "Are we going to the moon or just through Belgium?" But then the quartermaster doesn't laugh back. He just mutters, "You'll wish it was the moon," and moves on to the next man. Dagger doesn't like the mask, can't blame him. Horses hate anything on their faces, and this contraption feels like a punishment. It smells like rubber and vinegar and fits like a muzzle from a nightmare. The first time you try to slip it on, he jerks his head up and back so violently that you nearly take a hoof to the chest. You calm him down with sugar and soft words, trying again, this time slower. Eventually he allows it. Not happily, but with that same reluctant trust he's given you since the start. You tie the straps, check the filter, and stand back to look at the result. He looks like some kind of mechanical beast from a future that shouldn't exist. And you realise then, this war is no longer about humans and horses, it's about survival in a world trying to choke itself to death. Gas isn't new. You've seen what it does. Men clawing at their throats, eyes foaming, lungs shredded from the inside. You've passed through yellow-green fog banks left behind like venomous ghosts. You know that the worst thing isn't the gas itself, it's the fear of it. The way it makes people twitch when they smell smoke. The way it makes every breeze feel suspicious. But now it's becoming common. Routine. Gas expected is scribbled onto dispatch orders. You get used to seeing signal flags warning of wind direction, and you learn that horses, like men, don't always survive the experience, even with the masks. The first time it hits during a ride, you're carrying a dispatch along a low valley, the air still, sky too clear to trust. You're halfway through when the breeze shifts and your nose wrinkles at the sharp scent of mustard. You stop cold, reach for your mask, snap it on, your fingers trembling. Then you turn to Dagger. He's already stamping his feet, sensing the wrongness in the air. You fumble with the buckles, swearing, trying to get the mask over his head. The straps are stiff, your hands are clumsy. The wind picks up and the edge of the gas cloud rolls over the hill like a living thing. You finally get it on, barely, as the first wave hits. You can feel your throat tightening even with the filter. You mount quickly, heels to his sides, and ride through the haze. It's like galloping through a dream gone sour. The visibility drops to nothing. The gas stings your eyes. You keep your head low, trying to breathe shallowly. Dagger snorts beneath the mask, his breath coming fast and loud through the filter, but he keeps going. You can feel his panic in the way he moves. Less sure, more frantic, but he doesn't falter. You don't know how long you ride. Time gets sticky in the fog, but eventually the cloud thins. The wind does its job. You burst out into clean air and nearly fall from the saddle with relief. You both sit there for a moment, gasping, coughing, heart hammering like it's trying to escape your chest. You strip off your mask, then his. You check him. Eyes, nose, chest, searching for signs. No burns, no bleeding, just the tremble in his legs and the foam at his mouth. You whisper, "It's over. We made it." And he presses his nose against your arm. You return to camp late. One of the quartermasters sees the gas mask still dangling from Dagger's tack and just nods. "Lucky," he says. "You're sick of that word." After that, gas drills become part of the routine. You practice fastening the mask faster, checking the straps even in darkness. Some horses won't wear them, they panic, rear, kick, until someone gets hurt or worse. Those horses stop going on missions. No one says what happens to them. A rumour spreads that certain gas types are being refined to target animals specifically. Denser compounds, heavier than air, designed to cling to the ground and strike low. Whether it's true or not, no one knows, but every rider starts carrying 2 spare filters, one for himself, one for the horse. The reality sets in, you're no longer just fighting other men, you're fighting the very air. During a particularly bad week, you hear about a Canadian unit that lost a whole cavalry column in a gas ambush. 30 men, 42 horses. Survivors said it looked like a wave of fog rolled in and everything just stopped. They found one horse alive hours later, still standing, his eyes burned shut, his mask halfway torn. You don't know if that story's true either, but it keeps you awake. There are fringe stories too, the kind that no one admits to believing, but everyone whispers when the fire burns low. A French rider swears he saw a gas cloud move upwind like it had a will of its own. A corporal in your unit claims he heard a horse crying from inside the fog, only when he went in there was nothing there, just hoof prints that circled and circled until they vanished. And yet, despite all of it, you keep riding, because the war doesn't care about fear. It doesn't pause for grief. If a dispatch needs to go, someone has to carry it. And if the only road runs through poison air, then so be it. You and Dagger go together, masks on, heads low, eyes squinting through the blur. You ride like shadows, like phantoms immune to death, even though you know better. One night, after a run that nearly choked you both, you sit outside the stable watching Dagger sleep. His flanks rise and fall in the firelight, his breath still raspy. You wonder what it must be like to go through all of this without ever understanding why. To carry men into horror because they ask you to wear a mask without knowing what it's for. You whisper, "I wish I could explain it." He flicks his ear. You don't know if it's understanding or indifference, but he stays. And tomorrow, when the horn sounds and someone shouts your name, you'll saddle up again, mask ready, rifle slung, dispatch in hand, because the war keeps breathing, and so do you. They don't tell you it's going to work, they don't tell you it's a good plan, they just hand you the orders and say form up. You read the first line, then the second, and feel your stomach coil like barbed wire. A full cavalry charge, in daylight, across open terrain, against an entrenched position. You glance up at the officer delivering it, half expecting a punchline, but there's no grin, no dramatic pause, just a grim, quiet nod. It's real. You've seen charges before, you've ridden through one, you know the sound bones make when they snap mid-gallop, you know the way machine gun bullets whistle when they slice past your ear. The idea of doing it again feels like volunteering to headbutt a steam train, and yet, the orders are clear. The difference this time is the terrain. It's not the thick, swampy hell of no man's land. It's a long, shallow valley between 2 ridgelines, grass-covered, flanked by trees. The enemy doesn't know you're there. Not yet. Intelligence says they're light on artillery and poorly fortified. If we hit fast, says your commander, we break them before they know what's happening. It sounds hopeful, which in this war is almost always a bad sign. You look at Dagger and say, it's happening again. He shakes his head like he's trying to flick the thought away. You spend the night prepping your gear, cleaning your rifle, sharpening the saber you swore you'd never draw again. The air is tense, electric, full of movement that isn't quite panic. The other riders pace like animals before a storm. You catch snippets of conversation, someone making peace with God, someone else debating whether to tie down their bedroll or just leave it behind. One guy's writing a letter and can't get past the first sentence. At dawn, the bugle call cuts through the stillness like a blade. Horses whinny. Men groan. You saddle Dagger in silence, moving by muscle memory. Every strap is double-checked. Every buckle tight. You don't speak, you barely breathe. The sun rises blood orange, painting the valley in an eerie glow. Mist clings to the grass. The formation assembles, 36 riders in rows, sabers glinting, lances ready, carbines slung across backs. You haven't seen this many mounted men in one place since the beginning of the war. It feels like stepping back in time, like something ancient painting come to life. Glorious, suicidal. And then, without ceremony, without flair, the command comes. Charge! It starts with hooves. That rolling thunder, that sound you'll never forget as long as you live. The formation surges forward, picking up speed, the wind lashing your face and your hands gripping the reins like they might slip away with your sanity. Dagger flies beneath you, powerful and terrifying, muscles bunching with each stride. The grass blurs, the wind screams, and for a few seconds it's beautiful. Absolutely, impossibly beautiful. Then the gunfire starts, not from the trench, not yet, but from the tree line. A scout must have spotted you. A sharp crack, crack, crack rattles through the valley as rifles fire. The first man goes down with a strangled cry, then another, but the formation holds. You grip your saber, eyes locked ahead. Then you see it, the enemy position. A shallow trench line, hastily built, barely camouflaged. A few figures scramble to man the defences, clearly caught off guard. You're moving fast, too fast for them to react properly. Someone behind you lets out a war cry. You don't join in, you save your breath for staying alive. The first line hits, sabers flash, horses rear. You see the enemy recoil in shock, some trying to flee, others fumbling for their rifles. You don't think, you act. Dagger clears a sandbag with room to spare. You bring the saber down, not clean, not graceful, but effective. A man falls. You twist in the saddle, fire your pistol into the next shape that moves. It's chaos. Noise, smoke, screams. Yours, theirs, the horses. You wheel around and slash again. Dagger bucks, dodges, charges. The trench begins to collapse, literally and tactically. The defenders scatter like ants kicked from a nest. Within minutes, they're retreating. The remaining few throw down their weapons or run for the tree line. You're panting now, arm aching, heart a jackhammer in your throat. The fighting slows, then it stops. You blink, trying to absorb what just happened. You won! Somehow, impossibly, you won. Riders cheer, exhausted and blood-splattered, hugging each other in disbelief. Someone throws their cap in the air. A lieutenant collapses onto the grass, laughing like a man who just survived being hit by lightning. It's not total victory. The field still reeks of gunpowder and bodies, but the trench is yours, and the enemy is gone. You dismount slowly. Dagger's sides are heaving. He's bleeding from a scratch on his neck, nothing fatal, but enough to scare you. You drop to your knees beside him, pressing your forehead to his muzzle. "You magnificent bastard," you whisper. He doesn't respond. He just breathes. The aftershock sets in later. You walk the field. It's quiet now. Horses graze near the ridge. Medics tend to the wounded. You find one of your comrades slumped beside his mount, both of them dead, their heads touching. You look away. That night there is a fire, and food, and something that almost feels like celebration. You sit with a tin of coffee and stare into the flames, replaying every second in your head. You hear someone say, "It felt like the old days." You nod. It did, briefly, but this war doesn't care about nostalgia. The higher-ups hail it as the last successful cavalry charge of the Western Front. They even send a reporter to write about it. He sketches your horse, writes down your name, asks how it felt. You shrug and say, We got lucky. He laughs and writes something more poetic. You never read the article. What you do read later that week is another letter from Anna. She writes, I dreamed about you last night. You were riding again, but the sky was clear. No smoke, no shouting, just you and the wind. You fold it carefully, press it to your lips and tuck it into the pocket over your heart. Because the sky was clear that day. For a few moments. And sometimes that's enough to remember. You don't notice it at first. Not when it's happening. Not even when it's done. But later, days after the charge, as you're sitting by the cook fire picking up bread that tastes like sand, someone says something and you realise they're talking about Dagger. The way they say his name, low, respectful, almost reverent, sends a chill down your spine. You glance over, and there he is, standing in the shade near the latrine trench, swishing his tail with the same casual grace he's always had, as if he's completely unaware that among the ranks now, he's not just a horse, he's that horse. Word has spread about the charge, about how he leapt the wire, dodged the shelling, kept you upright when half the unit crumbled. You hear stories twisted in small ways, exaggerated like all good stories are. Some say he took a bullet to the flank and kept going. Others swear he saved not one but 3 riders, circling back through the smoke to guide them out. None of that is strictly true, but also none of it's entirely false, and you start hearing the word hero tossed around. At first, it's just the young replacements, the ones still figuring out how to lace their boots right. But soon the grizzled corporals say it too. That's a damn fine horse, they mutter as they walk past. One of the mess cooks leaves an extra slice of carrot on your tray. For the real officer, he jokes, nodding towards Dagger. The animal doesn't seem to notice, or maybe he does. Maybe it's in the way he moves now, a little more upright, a little more steady, as if he knows that eyes are on him. Not in vanity, just in quiet awareness. He lets the new guys pet his nose. He doesn't flinch when the shells hit closer than usual. And he stands so still during roll call that someone once asked if he was carved from wood. You start collecting stories about other horses, because now that Dagger's in the spotlight, every rider has one. There's a bay in the 4th Cavalry Division who once dragged his wounded rider 3 miles through machine gun fire, reins tangled around a broken forearm. There's a grey named Whiskey who supposedly knew how to find water better than the scouts, and a mare called Lady Grit who once kicked the door off a burning supply shack to pull her handler out. None of these animals asked for this, none of them knew what they were part of. But somewhere in the mess, they understood enough to keep moving forward, to carry us when we couldn't walk, to run into noise and fire and blood because we asked them to, because we trusted them to. One afternoon, a lieutenant from another regiment shows up just to see Dagger. He walks the length of the stable line, hands in his pockets, nods at the other horses politely, then stops in front of yours. He doesn't say much, just, huh, like something about Dagger confirms what he's heard. Then he takes off his glove, strokes the horse's nose and walks away without another word. The next morning your ration bag has 2 extra sugar cubes in it. You don't spoil Dagger. Not much. He still works, still rides out with you, still hauls dispatches, still does his duty. But you start brushing him a little longer. You whisper a little softer when he's spooked. You make sure he's always got dry straw to lie on, and if the other horses have to deal with a leaky stable roof, you find a tarp for his spot. The others don't complain. They get it. But even legends bleed. During a supply run, a stray piece of shrapnel catches Dagger in the hindquarters. It's not deep, but it's ugly. Bloody and raw. The kind of wound that makes your throat clench and your stomach twist. He stumbles but doesn't go down. You dismount, hands already reaching for the field bandage in your kit, heart hammering in your throat. He stands still while you dress the wound, only flinching once when you press the gauze to the gash. His breathing stays steady. He doesn't panic. You, on the other hand, are sweating through your coat. You keep talking to him, about the bakery or back home, about Anna, about anything except the fact that if this wound gets infected, he could die in 3 days. You don't say that part out loud. You walk him back, refusing to ride. The vet has a look, mutters something about clean-cut, lucky spot, and prescribes rest and limited movement. You sit outside the stable all night, leaning against the wall like a stray dog. The stars are out, and for once, no one fires a shell into the sky. You fall asleep with one hand resting on Dagger's flank, counting his breaths like rosary beads. The next few days are rough. He's sore, slow, restless. You keep him from licking the wound, keep the flies away, keep the stable boys from brushing too close. And he pulls through. Of course he does. Because Dagger isn't just a horse anymore. He's a survivor. Like you. When he's cleared for light duty, the whole unit acts like someone just got promoted. Someone chalks his name on the mess board under status updates. Someone else paints a crude but oddly accurate portrait of him on the side of a latrine, next to a half-finished sketch of Joan of Arc, oddly enough. You start to wonder if he's more famous than you are. You decide that's probably a good thing. And the thing is, he deserves it. Because the truth is, this war wouldn't work without the horses. They pull the guns, they carry the wounded, they haul the food, the water, the ammo. They ferry the dead back from places no one wants to go. They die by the thousands, quiet, noble, unthanked. If a man gets a medal, they write his name in the paper. If a horse does something incredible, it becomes a rumour, a story around a fire. But not this time. Dagger has become more than a rumour. He's hope, with hooves. And when you ride out again, saddle tight, dispatch in your pouch, your breath fogging in the cold, you feel him shift beneath you like he's ready for anything. The wound hasn't slowed him down. If anything, it made him fiercer. The world may forget your name, but they'll remember the horse. The line between fact and fiction gets blurrier the longer the war drags on. Men start talking more in half-truths, in stories passed from one fire to the next, warped and bent by boredom and booze. You sit at the edge of one of these fires, legs stretched out, dagger tied nearby, ears twitching as if he's eavesdropping too. It's late and the wind is cutting sharp, but the warmth of the flames and the rhythm of the voices make it bearable. A sergeant with the limp and too many medals leans in, voice low like he's about to share a secret recipe. "Did you hear," he says, "about the ghost cavalry?" You know this game. Another rider chimes in without missing a beat. "The French one? The unit that vanished in the Ardennes and rides only when the fog rolls in?" No, that's a different one. I'm talking about the Canadian riders. Galloped into a mist, never came out. People swear they see them at night, shapes on horseback. No hooves, no shadows. Someone snorts. Ghosts don't carry ammo pouches. You ever seen a ghost not properly outfitted? The sergeant fires back, and everyone laughs, even you. But later, when the fire dies down and the others wander off to their tents or their thoughts, the silence gets thicker. You sit there, poking the coals, and think about all the strange things you've heard, all the things you haven't talked about, the riderless horses that bolt across battlefields after their masters fall, the whispers that come from empty dugouts, the man who claimed he woke up with hoof prints around his tent and no horse in sight. There's something about war that cracks the door between what's real and what isn't. The constant closeness to death, the way sound and sleep twist around each other, the fact that you sometimes can't even trust your own memory, all of it conspires to make anything possible. And in that mess, stories take root. You remember one from early in the war? A captain in your old unit told it after one too many shots of contraband whiskey. Said he saw a man ride out alone into no man's land, with a flare in one hand and a revolver in the other. Didn't flinch, didn't jaw or shout, just rode into the dark like he had somewhere important to be. The enemy fired. The man didn't fall, just kept riding, then vanished. No one ever found the horse, or the rider, but the trench stayed quiet for a week after that. Of course it's nonsense, probably, but the thing is, you've started to see things too. Little things, shapes that move just outside the edge of your lantern, a glint of eyes that aren't from rats or foxes. Once, you swear Dagger stops and stares into the trees for a full minute, ears forward, body tense, like he's listening to something you can't hear. When you nudge him, he doesn't budge, just stands there, silent and still, like stone. You don't ask questions, and then there are the dreams. You don't talk about those either. The ones where you're riding, always riding, but everything is wrong. The ground is soft like water, the sky red as rust. The wind screams in a language you don't know, and ahead of you, always just out of reach, are dozens, no hundreds of horses, riderless, running full tilt, their eyes glowing like coals, their hooves never touching the ground. Sometimes you wake up to find Dagger watching you. Not blinking, just watching, like he was there too. Maybe it's all the smoke, the nerves, the sleep deprivation. Maybe you're just finally losing your grip, but then again, maybe not. You ask around, quietly, carefully. Turns out you're not the only one. One private swears a horse answered him during a patrol. Answered, not with a neigh, but with a sound that mimicked speech, low and gruff. Another swears he saw hoof prints in the mud leading into a trench that had been collapsed for weeks. And a corporal tells you, very seriously, very soberly, that during the last gas attack he saw a rider in full armour gallop straight through the fog, a flag flying from his saddle, and a sword that glowed like fire. When he chased after him, there was nothing there. No tracks, no prints, just quiet. Maybe it's the past coming back to check in, he says, voice tight. Maybe it's everything the horses remember showing up again. That one sticks with you. You start thinking of Dagger as more than just your companion, not just a fellow survivor, but a witness. He's seen more than most men, heard things, felt things. You wonder how much horses remember, not just in the way they avoid barbed wire or flinch at certain sounds, but really remember. The weight of things, the rhythm of loss. One day you pass a field dotted with the bodies of horses, no men, just animals. Dozens of them, still wearing tack, some with reins stretched toward the sky like they were reaching for something before they fell. A rider beside you mutters a prayer. You just look at them, and then at Dagger, and wonder if he recognises any of them. If they once drank from the same trough, ran the same drills, shared the same wind. That night, Dagger refuses to eat. You sit beside him, hands in your lap, and quietly tell him the stories again. The ones from before the war. About your little sister chasing rabbits through the garden. About the first time you rode a horse without falling off. About Anna, and how her handwriting curls at the ends like she's too shy to finish a thought. You talk until your throat aches. Then you rest your hand on his neck. Eventually he eats, slowly, one bite at a time. The next day you ride a dispatch across a field freshly hit with shellfire. The mud is thick, the sky is low, the wind howls, and for a moment, just a moment, you swear you hear hooves behind you. Fast, dozens, maybe more. You glance back, nothing there, but Dagger's ears twitch and he runs just a little faster. The war is starting to sag under its own weight. You can feel it in everything now, the way the trenches slump inward like they're so tired of holding back the earth, the way officers carry themselves with an exhausted kind of urgency, like men trying to run in water. Even the shelling has changed. It's less frequent, but somehow worse, like each explosion means more. Like the land itself is breaking in slow motion. You've been reassigned again. Not far, just up the ridge to a listening post that's barely more than a crate and a telegraph wire strung between two dying trees. Your new job is simple: ride between 3 forward positions and deliver updates when the lines go quiet, which is often these days. The wire cuts out like it's sick of trying. Too many trees, too much moisture, too much death. Dagger doesn't like this stretch of land. You can tell by the way he moves, nervous, twitchy, stopping more often than he used to. It's not the terrain. The paths are manageable, the brush thin, but there's a silence here that wraps around your neck and tugs, slow and steady. It's the kind of quiet that makes you realise just how loud death usually is. One morning you ride out early, frost still on the grass. You're bringing a reply from the westmost post. Short, clipped, marked urgent. Just coordinates really. But that's how it goes now. Words have shrunk to numbers. Names are replaced by units. No one bothers with flowery language when all anyone wants is the right shell to hit the right trench. The sun's coming up behind you as you cross a small clearing. Dagger hesitates. Just once, not a full stop, just a shift in his weight, like something deep in his body is telling him, no. You pause too, scan the horizon. Nothing moves. No sound, no birds, no wind. You tap your heels gently, and he moves forward again, but slower now. Halfway through the clearing, the shot rings out. You feel it before you hear it. A jolt, a thud, a sudden slack in Dagger's gait. He falters, stumbles. You grab the reins, trying to keep him upright, but it's like holding back a falling building. He crumples, front legs giving out, rear legs dragging through the grass as he tries, to stay standing. You leap off, landing hard, knees cracking against a stone. You roll, scramble back, and see the blood already blooming across his side. It's a clean hit. A sniper's hit, just behind the shoulder. Deep. You drop to your knees beside him, hands shaking, heart going full gallop. No, 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 no. You whisper, tearing off your pack, pulling out the bandages, pressing hard against the wound. The blood is hot, sticky. It soaks through the cloth in seconds. Dagger's eyes are wide, but not panicked. Not yet. He knows something's wrong, but he's still here. You hear another crack. Dirt kicks up inches from your boot. You drag him. Try to drag him into the underbrush at the edge of the clearing. It's barely cover, but it's better than nothing. You press yourself close to him, one hand holding pressure on the wound, the other fumbling for your pistol. You don't know where the sniper is, you don't care, you just want him to stop bleeding. Dagger's breathing slows. You whisper everything you can think of. Old jokes, his name, the name of that foal you saw once at the supply depot. Anna's letters. You tell him about her cinnamon fingers, how she's waiting, how she said she dreamed about him running through fields without mud. You say her name again and again. You say his name. You say please. An hour passes, maybe more. Eventually the firing stops. You don't move, you can't. You sit there, arm numb, shirt soaked, resting your head against his neck. His eyes are still open. You're not sure if that's good or bad, but he's alive, barely. At dusk, help comes. A scouting party following the sound of gunfire finds you. They wave, shout. You don't respond, you just raise one hand. When if they reach you, they see the blood, and one of them immediately kneels beside you, checking Dagger's vitals. He whistles low. Tough bastard, he says. Horse too. They rig a sling between two poles and strap Dagger in, slowly, gently, with the kind of care you didn't know still existed out here. You walk beside him all the way back to camp, one hand on his flank, his blood staining your fingers. The vet doesn't make promises. He looks at the wound, presses, mutters, rinses, packs it with something that smells like herbs and rot. Could go either way, he says, wiping his hands. Depends on how much fight he's got left. You already know the answer. At night, you sleep on the stable floor, your coat draped over your shoulders, your hand resting on his withers. You wake every few hours to check his breathing. Still there, still going. And when the sun finally rises again, casting pale light through the slats in the stable roof, you feel a shift beside you. Dagger. Dagger lifts his head. Just a little. Just enough. He's still here. Word spreads fast. The sniper shot the horse. That horse! People come by in ones and twos to check on him, to see the miracle, to maybe touch his muzzle like it might pass along some of that strength. One of the scouts brings a carrot and leaves it beside the hay. Someone else offers a blanket. A third just sits and watches, silent. The war goes on, but for now, in this little corner of hell, there's still a horse breathing, still a man watching over him, and that somehow feels like a victory. You return to the Western Front with something hollow inside you, like a piece has cracked loose and is just rattling around now, making noise when things go quiet. Dagger walks beside you, stiff but upright, limping slightly on his back leg, the wounds healing slowly, stubbornly, the way everything does out here. He's thinner now, more scar than skin in some places, but he keeps moving, always moving, just like you. The landscape hasn't improved in your absence, if anything it's worse. The shell craters are deeper, the air more metallic, as if the sky is rusting along with everything beneath it. The trenches seem quieter, but not in the good way. Not peace, just the tired kind of silence that follows after too much noise. You see new faces, raw recruits barely old enough to shave, staring at you and Dagger like you're both ghosts from an old tale. You're not sure you aren't. Everything's more mechanical now. There are tanks, actual tanks, growling and grinding their way across the field like oversized beetles dipped in grease and madness. You watch one pass during your first week back. It lurches through the muck, iron wheels churning, treads smashing what's left of a fence into the splinters. Its turret swivels like a blind eye looking for something to destroy. The crew inside doesn't wave, doesn't even look out, just steel and fumes. You hate the tanks. Everyone does. They smell like progress, the kind that leaves soot in your lungs. They make horses skittish and men superfluous. You can feel them ushering in something that doesn't have room for you, or for Dagger. Command still uses cavalry, but barely. Mostly as messengers, occasionally for quick patrols, rarely for combat. You hear whispers that entire horse units are being disbanded, their mounts sold off or put to work dragging supply carts like glorified mules. You clench your fists whenever someone calls the cavalry outdated. You know what Dagger has done, what you've done. The mud still remembers. The blood in your boots still remembers. Your new orders are patrol duty deep in the outer edges of the line. Quiet sectors, supposedly. You and a few others ride out twice a day, checking on wire, scouting for signs of German movement, making sure no one's getting clever in the mist. It's easy work, but it wears you down in a different way. There's too much time to think. The landscape looks more like a moonscape now than Earth. Trees without leaves, mud without end, water-filled craters reflecting nothing but grey. You ride through it like a ghost visiting the wreckage of someone else's memories. Dagger doesn't flinch at anything anymore. Not at sudden bursts of gunfire, not at gas alarms, not even at the distant guttural groan of a tank moving somewhere beyond the next hill. One evening you find a dog, small, scrappy, half-starved thing, curled in a ditch with a bootlace around its neck like someone's idea of a leash. You climb down, hand out slow, doesn't bark, doesn't run, just stares. You give it a bit of jerky from your saddle pack and carry it back to camp tucked inside your coat. The other men laugh when they see it. "You adopting strays now," one says. You glance at Dagger, then the dog. "Seemed like the right crowd." The dog stays, sleeps near Dagger's stall. Won't let anyone else near him but you. You name him Flicker, after the way his ears twitch at the slightest noise. He follows you on patrols now, weaving between Dagger's legs like he's always been part of the team. The three of you become something of a sight. The battered rider, the half-limping warhorse, and the twitchy little mutt with the world's most suspicious nose. The other units give you space. They nod with a certain quiet respect, or maybe superstition, as if they're not sure whether you're still soldiers or something older, something that's survived too long to be called by rank anymore. On one patrol you spot a German scout on the ridge. He sees you two. You both freeze, just two men on horses staring at each other across 100 yards of silence. No weapons drawn, no moves made. After a long moment he raises his hand, not a wave, just a kind of nod. You do the same, then you both turn and ride in opposite directions. Back at camp you tell no one, and that night you find a scrap of paper in your pack. You recognise the handwriting instantly. Anna's. You don't remember putting the letter there. You must have tucked it in days ago, maybe weeks. She writes about a dream again, another one with you riding home, this time down a dirt path lined with wildflowers. She says she had the dream twice, which means it must mean something. You smile at that, fold the letter, slide it back inside your coat over your heart, the only armour that's worked this whole war. You wake the next morning to find Flicker curled beside Dagger's hooves, both of them asleep in perfect stillness. You kneel, scratch behind the dog's ears, and whisper, "It's almost over." You hope it's true, because this isn't war anymore. Not really. It's aftermath pretending to be war. Everyone's just waiting now, waiting for something to give. Some days it feels like even the enemy is tired of fighting. The gunfire slows. The barrages don't come as often. You hear rumours, peace talks, ultimatums, shifts in power, but you don't trust any of it until someone tells you directly it's over. And when they do, you know it won't feel like you think it should. You won't jump up and cheer, you won't cry, not right away. You'll probably just sit with Dagger, run your fingers through his mane and stare at the horizon like you're still looking for something to report. Because coming back is a different kind of battle, and you're not sure who you are without the war following behind you like a shadow. The morning of the armistice, the sky is too blue. It doesn't match the mud or the rusted wire or the tired slouch of every man you see. It stretches overhead like it doesn't know there was a war, as if the world woke up and decided to paint itself fresh again, while the rest of you are still dragging your boots through the same rot-stained soil. The news arrives by courier. A real courier, not one of your own riders this time, but a motorcyclist with goggles and a grin too big for someone who's just been nearly blown off the road by celebratory gunfire. He skids into camp, throws his arms in the air and yells, "They signed! 11 a.m. today, it's over." You watch the word ripple out, like someone dropped a stone into a very quiet pond. At first, no one moves. Not really. A few men blink, a few mutter, someone scoffs. Bet they change their minds by lunch. Another lights a cigarette with shaking hands, but slowly, quietly the energy shifts. Helmets are removed, canteens passed. Someone starts whistling, off-key but brave, and then, like a match to dry straw, cheers erupt. Raw, hoarse, almost unsure of themselves. You don't cheer. You walk to Dagger's stall instead. He's already awake, snorting, shifting his weight like he knows something's different. You open the door and step inside, resting your forehead against his, one hand on his mane. "We made it," you whisper. "Somehow." You remember saying the same thing before, after the charge, after the sniper, after the gas. But this time it feels final. And strange, like the story ended before you finished reading it. At 11 sharp the guns go quiet. It's unnatural, like someone clapped their hands and banished thunder from the earth. You're not used to silence. You don't trust silence. For a moment, you think it's a trick, but it holds minute after minute of pure, fragile quiet. And with each second, something loosens inside you. Something you didn't even realise had been clenched so tight for so long. You sit beside Dagger and wait for your legs to stop trembling. Later that afternoon, the captain gathers your unit near the mess tent and gives a short, tired speech. He thanks you all. He names the fallen. He says there will be more to do, rebuilding, reorganising, maybe redeployment. But for now, the fighting is done. A few men clap, others stare at their boots. No one quite knows what to feel. You walk back to your tent, pack your kit, and realise you have no idea what to do next. You thought it would be celebration, dancing maybe, drinking, but there's a quiet numbness settling over everything, like the war sucked the joy out of you along with everything else. You see a man crying beside a latrine and don't stop him. You just hand him your last cigarette and keep walking. That night a fire is lit in the centre of camp. Not a cook fire, but a proper bonfire. Someone finds a fiddle, someone else has a harmonica. You all gather around, sipping from dented flasks, eating stale bread like it's a feast. There's laughter. It sounds foreign, like a dialect you've forgotten. You lean against a tree with Dagger's reins in your hand, Flicker curled at your feet. The three of you as always. No medals, no speeches, just warmth. You tip your head back and stare at the stars. They're still up there, same as they were on that first night before France, before the mud, before everything that came after. A young private stumbles over to you, his eyes glassy. "That your horse?" he slurs. You nod. "He's, like, famous or something, right?" You shrug. "He just didn't die." The kid blinks at that, then lets out a snort. "Guess that's enough these days." He pats Dagger's shoulder, clumsy and unsure. "Good job, boy." You don't correct him. Later, someone passes around paper and pencils. "Write home," they say. "Tell someone." You take a sheet, stare at the blankness of it, and feel a kind of vertigo. What can you say? How do you describe years of mud and blood and ghosts and hooves and silence? How do you wrap all that up and send it to someone who still thinks the world is sane? You try anyway. "Dear Anna, the war is over. I'm still breathing. So's Dagger, and the little dog I told you about. His name's Flicker. We'll be heading back soon. I don't know when, but I'll come home different. Not in a bad way, just different. Tell the oven to be ready. I miss the smell of cinnamon more than anything. Love you." You pause, then you just sign your name. You fold it, seal it, and hand it off to the runner without a word. That night, sleep comes heavy and without dreams. No galloping, no gas, no fire, just blackness, soft and slow, like the war's finally taken its hands off your throat. When you wake, it's still quiet. The next few days blur into each other. Units pack up, trenches are cleared, horses are examined, dinned, tagged, tools reassigned. You keep Dagger close. There's a rumour they'll be sold off to farmers mostly. Some might be euthanized if they're too injured to work. You fight that with everything you've got. You speak to every officer you can find, wave papers, shout names, beg. Eventually someone waves you off and scrawls personal exemption on Dagger's record. You don't let him out of your sight after that. And then, one cold morning, the order comes down, en memore. You're going home. The walk to the transport truck feels heavier than it should. You lead Dagger slowly. Flicker trots beside you, tongue lolling. You pass rows of tents collapsing, empty supply crates, footprints that end nowhere. You climb aboard, settle into a wooden bench, and for the first time in years, you look like a civilian, not a warrior, just a man with a horse and a dog and a past that smells like cordite. As the truck rolls forward, you don't look back. There's nothing left behind you but ghosts, but you do look down at your boots, at the dried blood still crusted on the laces. You think of the mud, the gas, the letters, the firelight, the sound of hooves at midnight, the time Dagger almost died, the time you almost did, and you realise that you survived not because of glory, not because of skill, but because of three things: luck, the horse, and the will to keep moving. Home doesn't look like you remember, not at first. The village has the same name, the same church bell, the same stone walls weathered from too many winters, but everything feels just slightly off, like someone rearranged the furniture in your favourite room and hoped you wouldn't notice. The trees are taller, the roads narrower, the air cleaner somehow. like it's never known the taste of mustard gas or cordite. You step off the truck with your duffel slung over one shoulder, Dagger trailing behind on a lead rope, Flicker asleep in the straw bed of the transport like he owns the place. A few heads turn as you walk down the main road, boots crunching gravel, the dog waking with a grunt to trot at your heels. No one rushes out to greet you. But you didn't expect parades. That was never your style. It's not until you reach the bakery, her bakery, that it starts to feel real. Anna is outside, dusting flour off a wooden stool, her back to you. Her hair's longer now, tied back with a red ribbon. You remember buying that ribbon at the market the summer before the war started. It was the last time either of you worried about anything smaller than death. You clear your throat. She turns slowly. Her hands go still, her eyes go wide, and for a moment, the world does that thing it used to do in battle, freezes completely. Then she drops the flour rag and runs. She throws herself into your chest like she's trying to make sure you're solid. Her arms wrap around your ribs, squeezing so hard it knocks the wind out of you. You hold her tighter than you've ever held anything. You smell yeast and sugar and sawdust and salt. Her tears soak through your coat, but you don't mind. You're crying too, quietly, without ceremony. Dagger stands a few paces back, watching. Flicker whines, tail wagging. When she finally steps back, she looks at you like you're something scraped up from a legend, battered and unbelievable. "You came back," she says, voice hoarse. "I said I would." She blinks, then laughs. "And you brought the whole damn army?" You glance at Dagger, who snorts, and Flicker, who's now eating something questionably edible from the gutter. They earned the trip. Inside the bakery, everything smells like home. Not in the poetic sense, literally. Butter, yeast, burnt sugar, and that warm, yeasty heat that lives in your bones. You sit at the small wooden table where she once folded dough and read your letters. She makes you tea, then bread, fresh bread, soft on the inside, crispy on the outside, real food, not trench rations. You eat it like it might vanish. She asks you to talk, but you don't start with the war, you start with the horse. You tell her about Dagger's stubbornness, his first real injury. The time he saved a man in a gas mask who couldn't find his way back. How he stood still during that last charge when everyone else broke and scattered. You tell her about the scar on his leg and the bandages and how he wouldn't lie down even when he should have. You don't cry during any of it, but your voice cracks when you say, "He never gave up on me, not once." She listens, eyes wet, and when she finally speaks, she says, "He's welcome here, for as long as he wants." That night, Dagger sleeps in the barn behind the bakery. Flicker curls up beside him, tail flicking at flies. You lie awake in your old bed, staring at the ceiling beams you used to count as a kid. Everything creaks a little louder now. Every shadow seems deeper. But it's safe. You know it's safe because you don't flinch when the wind bangs the shutters. You just roll over and fall asleep with Anna's hand resting on your chest like a promise. In the days that follow, life starts stitching itself back together. Not neatly, not fast, but enough. You help her knead dough in the mornings. Fix the loose hinge on the shop door, walk Dagger out to the field beyond the village where he can graze in the sun. You sit with Flicker on the porch and sip weak coffee, and watch the world go by like you're learning how to live all over again. Sometimes people stop by, kids mostly. They ask about the war, about the horse. One of them says, "Did he really run through fire?" And you just nod. You don't tell them about the noise or the mud or the way a man looks when he realizes he's lost a leg. You tell them about courage, about loyalty, about how Dagger never ran unless you told him to. You hear stories about the other cavalry horses. Most didn't come back. Some were sold off. Some put down. One ended up in a circus in Belgium. Another was turned into a plough horse, his medals tucked away in a farmer's drawer. You write letters. You try to track a few of them down. The responses are mixed. Some men don't want to remember. Others send back photos, smudged and creased, showing horses with grey muzzles and sad eyes. One day, a letter arrives from a former corporal. Inside is a picture of a bay mare and a note. "She's on a farm near Ypres now, has a foal of her own. Thought you'd want to know." You do. More time passes. Spring comes early. The trees bloom, the fields thaw. Dagger's limp fades. He starts galloping again in short bursts, just enough to stir up the birds and make Flicker bark until his voice cracks. You watch them from the bakery window, a fresh loaf cooling on the sill. Anna leans against your side and says, "You should write it down someday." You nod, but you don't, because you lived it. And Dagger? He doesn't need his story written. He is the story, living proof that courage isn't loud and it doesn't come with speeches or medals or statues. Sometimes it walks on 4 legs, breathes steady in the face of fear, and waits patiently for the man on its back to be ready. The war is over. But his part in it never really ends. It begins slowly, the realization that you're no longer needed, not in the way you once were. No more dispatches, no patrols, no maps to memorize, no trenches to memorize with your boots. At first, it feels like peace, real peace. You wake up in a warm bed, not to shellfire, but to birdsong. You eat real food off plates that match. You don't jump at the sound of clattering pans or doors slammed too hard by the wind. But after a while, the silence starts to feel heavier. The war's over. Everyone knows that. They hang flags and hold parades in cities you'll probably never visit. The newspapers call it the Great War, as if putting it on a pedestal makes it noble instead of obscene. But you're not the same, neither is Dagger. You both limp, though only one of you does it on the outside. Dagger begins to slow down. It's not dramatic, just little things. He takes longer to stand after resting. His coat greys faster than you'd expect. On some days he walks stiffly, muscles reluctant, joints creaky. You try to ignore it. You feed him better hay, rub his legs down with the oils the vet recommended, let him rest more. But you know what it is. Wear and tear, too many miles, too many missions, time catching up as it always does. One night you walk out to the barn and find him lying down, eyes open but not moving. You kneel beside him, the straw cool under your knees. He doesn't look in pain, just tired. You stroke his neck, fingers trembling. "You don't have to fight any more," you whisper. You sit with him for hours, the two of you surrounded by silence. Flicker curls nearby, sensing something in the air. You listen to Dagger's breathing, the slow rhythm of it, the deep exhale like the wind slipping out of a lung-shaped cave. You count each breath like a prayer. The vet comes the next morning, checks his heartbeat, feels the swelling in his joints, offers options, gentle ones. You shake your head. "No, not yet." And Dagger seems to agree. He gets up slowly, with that same stubborn grace you first saw in him years ago when you were still green and stupid and dreaming of heroism. He nudges your shoulder as if to say, "I'm not finished," so you adapt. You stop asking him to carry loads. You ride less, you walk beside him instead, past the bakery, past the stream, out to the orchard, where the trees bend like old men but still bear fruit. He enjoys the sunshine, the apples, the company. He becomes part of the town quietly. Kids come to pet him, farmers nod when he passes. Even the blacksmith, a tough old man with more beard than jaw, always has a sugar cube ready. Dagger takes it gently, like he knows exactly how rare kindness can be. You spend your evenings on the porch. Anna sits beside you, her head on your shoulder, reading aloud from some dog-eared book. Flicker snores under your chair, and Dagger stands in the pasture, silhouetted by the sunset, looking out toward the horizon like he's still watching for something only he can see. One autumn morning you find a letter tucked under the bakery door. It's from your old commanding officer. He's organising a memorial gathering. Former cavalrymen, surviving mounts, those who still have theirs. You read it twice, unsure how to feel. Then you fold it, tuck it into your coat and go out to the barn. Dagger looks up as you enter. You scratch behind his ears, the spot that always makes him lean in. "Want to see some old friends?" you ask. The journey takes a day and a half. You ride slowly, leading him beside the cart you hitched for the trip. You pass other travellers, some on foot, some by bicycle, fewer still by horse. The roads are dustier than you remember. The trees less green. When you arrive, it's just before dusk. The meeting place is a wide clearing near a half-dismantled training ground. There are a dozen other men there, some in uniform, most not. A few bring their horses, others just have photos. The air is thick with stories. One man tells of a charge through fog so thick he couldn't see the end of his own rifle. Another recounts sleeping beneath his horse during a shelling, convinced the animal's bulk saved him. There are jokes, toasts, tears. You stand to speak eventually, not because you want to, but because they ask you to. You clear your throat, hands in your pockets. "This is Dagger," you say. "He carried me across France, through gas, through blood, through things I still don't know how to explain. He never failed me, not once. If you're looking for a hero, he's standing right here. Dagger doesn't do anything dramatic. He just flicks his tail, chews a mouthful of grass and stares into the distance. The men nod. Some raise glasses. One salutes. On the way home, the silence feels less heavy. You return to the bakery, to Anna, to the rhythm of soft mornings and quiet nights. You still dream sometimes. Mud, fire, hooves, the sound of whistles, but less often. And when you wake, it's not with panic, just remembrance. One morning in spring, Dagger doesn't come to the fence for breakfast. You find him in the pasture, lying under the apple tree, the same tree he liked to stand beneath every summer. His eyes are closed, his body still. You kneel beside him, hands trembling. Flicker sniffs him once, then curls beside his side with a low, whimpering sigh. He's gone, not in pain, not alone, just gone. You bury him under the tree and you carve his name into the trunk with your old field knife. You don't cry until nightfall. When you do, Anna holds your hand and doesn't say a word. She doesn't have to. You spend the next few days sorting through your things, letters, photographs, a rusted horseshoe, the medal the officer gave you after the charge that worked. You place them in a wooden box, you tie it shut, and then you write one last letter. To anyone who reads this, there was a war, it was terrible. There were men who tried to be brave, and there were horses who were brave without trying. If you remember anything, remember this one. He was called Dagger. He carried me when I couldn't walk, stood when everything else fell, and waited for peace as patiently as the moon waits for the morning. He was cavalry. He was my friend. You sign it, you seal it, and you tuck it away for someone else to find someday. Now the years pass as they do, quietly, steadily, with fewer sharp corners. The war becomes something talked about over fences and in schoolrooms, remembered in headlines on anniversaries. You see your own story mentioned once in a history pamphlet, just a line about a cavalry courier and his horse named Dagger. They spell your name wrong. You don't correct it. The world moves on. Cars outnumber horses. Radio replaces letters. The fields where you once trained are turned to farmland again. But under the apple tree behind the bakery, where the grass grows thick and the earth holds secrets, there's still a shape in the soil where one horse rests, unforgotten. Sometimes on slow afternoons as you sit beneath that tree and close your eyes, and you hear it again, not a memory exactly, more like an echo, the rhythm of hooves in the distance, the snort of breath in the cold air, the soft jingle of tack before a ride. And in that moment, you don't feel old or you don't feel tired. You feel like you're back in the saddle, arms strong, spine straight, wind on your face. You feel Dagger beneath you, solid, trusted, unstoppable. The dog runs ahead, kicking up mud. The world waits to be braved again. But when you open your eyes, it's just the breeze in the grass, just the orchard. Just now, still you smile. Because some stories don't end, not really. They just ride on through time, through memory, through the hearts of anyone who ever stood beside something noble, scared, and brave. You lived it, and now you've heard it